Colleagues, we're going to start in just about 1 minute. Just want to give everybody a chance to get back to their seats. We're going to start in about 1 minute. Okay, so I think we're mostly back. We'll come back from recess and pick up where we left off. All right, welcome back. Hope everybody had a good lunch. So we are continuing on with our public safety city service area. We had just concluded the staff presentation. We're now turning back to council for questions. Let me start with Councilmember Ortiz.
Thank you so much, Mayor. I also want to thank all of our leadership in the box today during their presentation for public safety. Greatly appreciated the information shared here with the council and with the public. You know, this is a tough issue that we are discussing today. It's definitely complex, and there's a lot of gray areas, but you know, of course, there's always a difference between right and wrong. And, you know, over the past week, a child and his mother were assaulted in my district while they were on their way to school. Something families across the city of San Jose do every morning. The suspect, who I personally believe should be in jail, allegedly assaulted a minor, a woman, and used anti-LGBTQ slurs during the attack. The fact that this individual is unhoused, I believe, should not overshadow the severity of the crime. When someone poses a real physical threat to the public, they must be held accountable, whether through rehabilitation programs or the criminal justice system. Our current failure to intervene in cases like this is not just a lapse in policy. It's a systemic failure. But at the same time, I believe we must distinguish between individuals experiencing homelessness who are committing violent acts or selling drugs in the street, and those who are simply trying to struggle to survive every day. Like a single mother raising her children who are forced to live in a van, afraid of what the shelter life might mean for her family, or the LGBTQ person avoiding shelters due to the threat of discrimination or violence. These are vastly two different situations. They both demand different responses with varying levels of enforcement, support, and compassion. And so that's why we need to be very careful of large brushes to be utilized when making policy. So I have some questions. I guess this first question is for the chief. We talked a little bit beforehand, so you know kind of what I'm going to ask. But if our system is currently set up in a way which we're not currently detaining individuals who commit crimes while unhoused, serious crimes, then what is preventing the responsibility to shelter policy from being a great policy or a major policy, but it doesn't necessarily lead to the results or outcomes that the public is being promised?
That's a, Councilmember, that's a complex question. I think what you're asking, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think what you're asking is if people aren't going to remain in jail as the result of an arrest.
Yeah, exactly.
What would be the result?
Essentially, if there's an unhoused person who's assaulting person, I called San Jose Police Department, work with your officers, for best officers in the country, I believe. We're constantly working on abatements in my district. But if there's unhoused people who are assaulting people or worse, and they're not staying in jail, how are we going to expect to, if we're bringing individuals for refusing shelter, to get those individuals off the street, I guess?
So the Sheriff's Department, and I haven't spoken directly with Sheriff Johnson about this, but the things that I've read that their spokespeople have said in the media are that, arrests for things like trespassing will not result in a booked prisoner remaining in jail. They'll most likely be cited out. And so we know that going into it, which is one of the reasons why we want to work closely with the county to try to expand the circumstances for which we can take a person to the Mission Street Recovery Station as opposed to the jail. Not only will it avoid them having to go to jail in the first place, but it could hopefully connect them, even if they weren't accepting services while out in a neighborhood. Maybe once they get into that setting and we sort of break the cycle a little bit and they're meeting with folks that are offering them help, perhaps there'll be a connection made there. So I think that's one way in which we hope that this program could still, even at that last resort of having to make an arrest, still be able to connect people to some services that could potentially make a meaningful change in their life.
So now, necessarily, just so I understand, it kind of seems like the policy is evolving now, that the idea isn't necessarily to send them to the police departments, to send them to this recovery center?
So they will be arrested. They will not be issued a citation in the field because that wouldn't really accomplish anything. So they're either going to get booked into the jail, or if the county will allow us to bring them there and the circumstances are appropriate for it, we would like to take them to the Mission Street Recovery Station to give yet one more opportunity to be connected to services that can make a meaningful difference.
Okay. What is our relationship right now with the county? Are we in the process of having conversations? Do we have any MOUs that are getting ready to sign? I'm just thinking, absolutely we should be talking about policy, but I feel like we're putting the cart before the horse here,
So you're correct. We don't have that completely in place yet. So we do have an MOU with the county. We're the only law enforcement agency in Santa Clara County that can bring arrestees to this Mission Street Recovery Station. Otherwise, it's all voluntary. But San Jose Police Department initiated talks several years ago to bring first-time DUI arrestees to the Mission Street Recovery Station. So we have an MOU in place for that. We then expanded the MOU to allow low-level drug offenders to go there. And so we would like to expand it to cover most misdemeanors. Obviously there's certain exceptions where it wouldn't be appropriate, and there's certain circumstances where it wouldn't be appropriate. But we are in the very preliminary stages of discussing that with the county.
Okay. All right. So thank you for that. And has there been any discussions with the DA in regards to, I guess, regarding the severity of the crime, right? Instead of just going after unhoused and for refusing shelter, what about the individuals who are actively committing crimes? Are there discussions about that? Like, okay, there's a first step before just going after individuals who are refusing shelter.
So just to be clear, we're not arresting people for not accepting shelter. That we can't, as the city attorney mentioned, that's not something we could do under the law. But what we are doing is ensuring that the housing outreach team is engaging as many times as possible before an arrest for trespassing is made. And we can, after the recent grants pass case, the United States Supreme Court said there is no obligation for a city to offer shelter before making a trespassing arrest on public property. So there's no legal requirement to offer shelter at all as far as the United States Supreme Court is concerned. Mm-hmm. So we could go make those arrests now. The idea here is that we're going to do everything possible to be to make as many offers as possible to get somebody housed and assistance and services and whatnot before we go to that point of making an arrest. Unlike some of the other cities that have been, had just outright camping bans.
So we're not arresting them for refusing shelter. We're arresting them for trespassing after they've refused shelter.
That is correct.
Okay. And I wanted to ask, what are the criteria, I guess, that would determine what a bona fide refusal would be? Is there going to be, any sort of, equity looked into that conversation? Are we going to take into consideration that, you know, with the type of individual? Is it a family? Is it somebody who may not be successful in a shelter? How do those discussions work?
So I think that's something that is still, you know, we're still working through this. Obviously, we're in the very early stages, working very closely with the housing department on that. You know, I think, you know, there's also always the option of somebody simply leaving and not being arrested. So, I mean, it's if all the offers of shelter have been made and there's still people absolutely refusing to not, you know, to not just accept a particular shelter but not leave the area at all, then that kind of puts us in a position where we don't have a choice. We're going to have to make an arrest. So I don't really think we've had like discussions about exactly what you're saying. But again, we're at the very beginning stages here.
How is this, I guess then I'm hearing what you're saying. It sounds like something that we've actually worked together on for abatement. How is this different than a regular abatement, I guess? Is this just, how does this change us regularly abating somebody?
Hi, Councilman. Eric Sullivan, Director of Housing. So in our current outreach efforts for existing abatements, we make multiple offers for shelter space that is available to bring them in. And for those that may decline to shelter for whatever reason or accept an offer, then we come back to begin the move-in, they're not around. The differences of our existing work around outreach and engagement prior to an abatement and then how right to shelter will play, the primary difference is that we're basically going to do this outreach much earlier. So instead of doing it right before we're placing folks into shelter, we're going to do this earlier on in the process, as I mentioned, through the 3 phases, so that way we can begin that comprehensive collection of information. So where we identify those individuals who may be a threat to the encampment or the surrounding community, or whose high needs cannot be met, or they're not in a position where they can make an informed decision where they can be met, then we're going to have to, as mentioned in the PowerPoint slide, figure out a standard operating procedure for how information gets from the housing department to fill in all the information, as the city attorney had mentioned, over to the police department. So we'll have to determine what that would look like.
Okay, well, I mean, from what you're saying, I guess in theory, I agree with you. If someone is posing a danger to the other encampments, if somebody, obviously, I have, you know, individuals in my district who are unhoused where we try to talk to them, they physically can't communicate with us, they may be self-harming. Absolutely, those individuals need to get the support they need, and it may not look like remaining on the street. I feel like we're skipping a step here, and that if we aren't going lock in step with the county, we're going to continue to get no from them, and we can't do this on our own. And you get more with what? You get more with sugar than you get with salt, right? We can't just keep attacking them and then put in new policies that rely on us working with them, and then at the end of the day, they're going to refuse to work with us, and we're not going to see any change here. So I have major questions about this policy. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilmember. I appreciate your questions and comments, and I'm thrilled to hear that sounds like largely aligned in what we're trying to do here. I mean, I think you described it really well. I think there's basically 3 scenarios here. We're trying to triage. We have a very large unhoused population in the city, as we all know. We need to find the appropriate intervention based on the reality on the ground and the experience we have through outreach. For the vast majority of people on our streets, the appropriate intervention is to have shelter, to have a place for people to be. And as we all know, we have tried to prioritize individual rooms with a door that locks, low barrier, a lot of services. That's not infinitely scalable, as we all know. We're talking about budget impacts, and we know we can't continue to scale that much more than we have to date. But for most people, that intervention that's most appropriate is simply building out and managing dignified shelter with services. There's a second pathway here, which is folks who are unwilling or unable to accept shelter and services despite repeated outreach, where, as we so often see, there's a huge gap because our bar under Lantrum and Petra Short for taking someone to a place with services is to wait until they have their situation is so deteriorated that they are truly verifiably a harm to themselves or others, and which would warrant a trip to EPS, which tends to then lead to someone being back on the streets within 24 hours. It's an imperfect situation, and what we're proposing is still imperfect, but the idea would be to have grounds for getting someone to a treatment center like the Mission Street Recovery Center or another county-funded. Keep in mind the city cannot does not provide these treatment placements, but to get someone to the recovery center and then that third category is, as you also pointed out, I think the small proportion, but sadly where we've so failed someone typically, where chronic homelessness and untreated behavioral health issues leads to, I think, rare, but still the reality on our streets sometimes, as we saw evidence last week by a police officer being stabbed, a 15-year-old being punched in the face, and we all see these situations, and they're tragic. They're especially tragic because they're avoidable. If we intervene earlier and get people into shelter or treatment and hold people accountable for engaging with treatment when they're unwilling to accept shelter, I think we can break this cycle that we see play out over and over and over again. And I would just encourage folks, and I'll share this as well with our audience here today, to take some time to talk to our frontline police officers, firefighters, outreach workers, and maybe especially the doctors and nurses at EPS, who I've had the opportunity to have quite a few conversations with about the revolving door and that failure to intervene, and how dangerous it is to leave someone out there for years on end in chronic homelessness. So we do have to be very measured. In terms of county collaboration, we had a great meeting last week with the entire county leadership, from Board President Lee to head of supportive housing, behavioral health, county exec, assistant county exec or deputy county exec, DA, sheriff, and we are having ongoing conversations. And as we all know, well, we have some of us as electeds, whether on this dais or with county or state leaders, have very public debates and disagreements over strategy. At the end of the day, when it comes to doing the work, we absolutely deeply collaborate and view our services as a shared service delivery model. In fact, this weekend I was on the phone with the trust team, making sure they were aware of someone downtown who needed help. We are certainly in this jointly when it comes to delivering services for our most vulnerable residents. Doesn't mean we won't publicly have some big debates over scalability, cost, who should do what, and where we're going. That's healthy, I think. Okay. Let's keep going. I'll turn it over to Vice Mayor Foley.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councilmember Ortiz, for your questions on responsibility to shelter, but I'm going to shift gears a little bit. This is the Public Safety CSA, and both of your departments, both police and fire, are understaffed. Can you, both of you, I'll start with you, Chief Joseph, let me know what is our number of vacancies and what's your marketing plan for reaching out to recruitment, getting new officers. Same question for you, Chief Sapien, so you have an advantage, you get to think about it.
Okay, thank you, Vice Mayor. So we currently have about roughly 130, between 125 and 130 budgeted vacant positions. That will change next month. We're starting an academy, which will be one of the largest police academies, I think the largest we've had since before COVID. We're hoping to have between 40 and 44 recruits. We've been operating between 20 and 30 with most of our academies, sometimes even lower than that. So to be over 40 is a very encouraging sign to us. We've with your assistance, we've gotten more money for our online profile, our online advertising, which is where we get a large percentage of the applicants we do get. We recently went with a new online advertising company, which we think is going to be much more productive. They came out and they specifically tailored their approach to our needs. We're working with community groups to make sure that we have a physical presence at large community events throughout the city, because we believe that bringing our recruitment efforts back locally is going to pay off more in the long run than recruiting nationally. Recruiting nationally sometimes brings in numbers in the short term, but it results in people often leaving the organization after a short period of time, mostly for personal reasons. And sometimes the cost of living. They see our very high salaries advertised, and then they get here and they realize that the cost of living can attack that a little bit. So things are turning in the right direction. You know, we do all the traditional types of recruitment efforts that any police department is doing. We're at community colleges, we're at universities, we're at job fairs, we're at military bases. We have our cadet program, and we're standing up our paid cadet program to get the older cadets paying job before they're old enough to become police officers, to keep them in the organization. So we're attacking the idea of recruitment on a lot of different fronts. I do see it turning. It's turning slowly, a little more slowly than I'd like, but it is at least trending in the right direction. And with that, I'll turn it over to the fire chief.
Thank you. Just as a follow-up, thank you for coming, to both of you chiefs, for coming to my event, Music in the Valley, on Saturday, and there was a tremendous amount of your officers there who were just wandering around chatting with people and actually recruiting, doing the best they could, going up to the booths and recruiting and talking about the work that they do. So that person-to-person contact, I think, is important, and it humanizes the police force. So thank you for being there, for your support, and thank you for the response, and I hope you're successful, because everywhere we go, I hear from neighbors who want police officers out there to slow down traffic. And it's more Vision Zero enforcement issues are of a huge concern around our community as other public safety issues, but definitely in our pedestrian and street safety. Okay, thank you. Chief Sapien, your turn.
Thank you, Council Member. As of pay period 9, the fire department is at a 6.94% vacancy rate for sworn personnel. That equates to 50 positions. At present, we're in backgrounds with a target of hitting a class of 30 in August, which should catch us up. We have some signs that there'll be some attrition in January the following year due to retirement, so we'll be pretty close to flush once we get that next academy online. As you are all aware, post-COVID, there was a statewide paramedic shortage that we were struggling with and had to really, frankly, slow down hiring because we were not realizing enough qualified candidates. Things have turned quite dramatically since then, and we are seeing a more robust qualified candidate pool. And so our efforts are back to really trying to attract a diverse workforce that represents the city that we serve. We continue a variety of activities with regards to community outreach and recruitment. We're maintaining our annual Women's Boot Camp, for example, as an event that's coming up just this month. And we continue to be present as much as possible in recruitment fairs and events alike.
That's great, thank you. And I know both of your departments see a number of retirements in January every year. Having sat on the Police and Fire Retirement Board, the numbers that come in are pretty astounding in January. So I know you'll all will be facing that. And to you as well, Chief, thank you for coming to my event. And Fire Station 9 was there with a truck there too, so I really appreciate that. That's really where I wanted to go. Oh, I did want to ask you, Chief Sapien, about the, and I'm not sure if I need to wait on this question or not. I might need to wait for finance, but I'm curious how you are going. Can you tell me about the process of the first responder fee, how we plan to collect that?
Thank you, Council Member. Yes, this item will come up in fees and charges and will also be moving forward in two separate ways. One is we will be bringing to Council a draft ordinance for approval, which will be the sort of the first stage of identifying the program. And then with that, we will be developing policy. Council just approved our agreement with our third-party billing firm, and so we are working with them on those policies. So I don't have an exact answer for you today, but I will tell you that the firm that we've contracted with is working with several agencies across the state on first responder fees and with compassionate billing practices. And so we're going to learn as much as we're going to try to drive the outcome that we're looking for.
Great. Thank you very much. That's it for me, Mayor.
Thanks, Vice Mayor. Appreciate it. And Chief, just as we transition here to the Vice Mayor's first question about recruitment, we're setting a performance target within our focus area dashboards of increasing our enrollment in police academies by 33% this coming fiscal year. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Excellent. All right. Love it. Okay. Let's go to Councilmember Campos.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to our staff for this presentation, for your work in this important CSA. I do have a few questions. The first is actually, I hope we have our director of IT or someone from the IT department here to help me understand. There is a 311 type app, and maybe the mayor can help me articulate this if I'm not doing a good enough job, but this was from direction through the previous council to create a 311 type app that would help triage concerns from neighbors related to homelessness. Is someone able to share with me where is our progress on that?
I see Khalid Tawfiq coming on down. Thanks for the question, council member.
Thank you, Councilmember. Khalid Tawfiq, Chief Information Officer and IT Director. Yes, we do have a plan for it, and we currently have a system that was developed last year, but it's not part of the 311 program. And there are conversations in how we can integrate the homeless reporting or management of the services into the 311 in the next fiscal year. So that's already part of the plan for the next 12 months.
So what is the timeline that we can anticipate this going online for residents to use?
As part of the budget or proposed budget in 25-26 is additional resources to revamp the 311 mobile app and the website. So based on that, we were looking at base case scenario is about 6 to 8 months before we can incorporate. But this is some of the activities we're looking at and to see how we can incorporate the existing solution or services into the 311 workflow.
Thank you. I think that innovative strategies like that was my only question for you.
Okay.
Thank you. Are really strategies and opportunities that we have as a city to try and work on these issues that are impacting every district across the city. I also recognize that through previous council direction, we are having new shelters open. And, you know, on the topic of data and creating policy that is data-driven, it's important that we have the right information to make those decisions. We know that at 1 Branham Lane, when people are experiencing homelessness and they're offered safe, dignified solutions to getting off the street, the overwhelming response is yes. We saw that around 90% or more of our neighbors are accepting the help that's being offered to improve their lives and the livelihoods of our community. And so speaking about data and the metrics and data points that will demonstrate that the policy of responsibility to shelter is the right policy to be effective, do we have performance metrics and dashboard indicators that will show over time that we've been successful? How is that being thought of, and how will that be implemented?
So as we think about how do we craft the performance measures, as I mentioned during the earlier session, we'll need to identify what are those uniform characteristics within outreach, given that outreach is very much a case-by-case basis. So how do we identify what is uniform throughout the entire system? And this is work that we're doing now so that we can best measure what is going to be the metrics to which the enhanced engagement team will be measured against. So we'll come back to, as the chief had mentioned, we're still working through the SOPs and working through what is performance measures so we can come back and provide that detail. So I can't speak to it today.
What are the options for performance metrics that we're using? Is it 0 people at encampment? Is it 0, like what are the options that you're evaluating?
So are you speaking specifically to how we do outreach now for when we're when we're doing a move into a new shelter system?
Well, I'm just thinking about this policy that we have to think about, and how are we going to be able to show that it's being successful? One example is the Olive program, right? We are measuring success of the Olive program by having vehicles move around. So in that sense, what does success look like for responsibility to shelter?
I think what success is going to look like is just the effectiveness of the abatements, and this is speaking broadly as we look to determine what is the actual performance metrics. But success will look like is what is the total number of kind of engagements that we're having, how many of those are successfully leading to any number of outcomes, which includes accepting shelter or housing, which includes accepting other forms of services, which includes adherence to the code of conduct requirements, which includes connecting with, as we're experiencing through some of our outreach workers, the case file manager who is providing a housing choice voucher, right? There's a plethora of items that our outreach workers experience when connecting with our unhoused residents. So we have to figure out what is those performance metrics, those points of engagements, those services and options and considerations being offered that is fairly uniform. And this will be a rather iterative process to then determine what is the best outcome of success and how we're going to define that moving forward.
I appreciate that response. I think that all of those success metrics don't necessarily need a responsibility to shelter policy to ensure that we are reaching that level of success as a city and as a community. And so I am very cautious about a policy that doesn't have a strong metric system before being implemented, especially when there aren't cities across the nation that we can compare this policy to and say, oh yeah, they achieved their goal with this policy. So it's really, really important that we're thinking about this policy through data-informed lenses, especially at a time when we are looking at new shelter capacity opening. We have yet to see the impacts of this historic level of city spending on emergency interim housing and shelters. We also know that we are underbuilt in providing shelter access and capacity to families with young children, to foster youth aging out of the foster care system. And so if there is a single mother with an autistic young adult that is over the age of 18 and will not be able to be in a shelter together because of that age difference and because we haven't built enough shelter capacity for families experiencing homelessness, if that single mother says, no, I am not going to move into a shelter that separates me from my child, are we counting that as a refusal?
I don't have any data.
Sorry, 1 second. I'm just going to ask the audience to not disrupt the meeting, or we will have to clear the chamber. This is an opportunity for the council to ask questions and hear from staff. This is a council study session. Thank you. Go ahead, Eric.
Thank you, Councilmember, for the question. I don't have any data that speaks to divergence of women from children or parents from children that then is registered on any existing databases as a rejection or denial of shelter. We can look to, as I mentioned, there is a plethora of data points that are being collected by the outreach teams, and since it is very case-by-case driven, we'll have to determine what are points of uniformity within that in order to measure performance of this team, and then two, where there are insufficient shelter spaces for particular populations. You know, we mentioned before, we'll have to figure out ways in which we can better address and expand existing supply to meet those needs.
I appreciate the honesty. It definitely sounds like we haven't had the time as a council, because really we haven't. This policy came forth as part of our budget conversation, which is not typical for policy of this stature to be decided by the council. And so I think that it is really, really important that we have the opportunity to, and the time really, to think through all of the unintended consequences of a policy like this. You know, when we are talking about the issues that people who are program resistant are facing, whether it's mental health, substance abuse, or alcohol abuse, the place to break the cycle isn't well into adulthood. It's early prevention. early prevention in the form of stable housing, good jobs, and strong social safety nets. So if we as a city are truly driven to investments that improve the quality of life in our community, it's our duty to scrutinize policy like responsibility to shelter ordinance that are not rooted in the policies that are proven to end homelessness. And it looks like my time is up, but clearly I have a lot of concerns with this policy.
Thanks, Councilmember. Let me try to clarify a few facts that I think are important for everyone to be on the same page about. First of all, the budget cycle and the March budget message is exactly the time that some of the most ambitious policy initiatives are brought forward, typically by the mayor or Brown Act groups at the beginning of the budget process. If you look historically, whether it was some of Mayor Liccardo's housing initiatives, or before Mayor Reed's pension reform initiatives, they actually were initiated at the beginning of the budget cycle because that's when we make trade-offs and resource our top priorities and figure out how the goals we're setting will be reflected in the staffing model we put forward and the programs and policies that we choose to fund. So I would argue, and I think our past practice has been, that March tends to be where many of the most ambitious initiatives are introduced and discussed. I understand everyone's desire to have perfect clarity, and we can certainly go through an exercise of finding all the gray areas, all the question marks, all the things that will never be perfectly answered between the city and county. But I think what we most need is engagement and action. I will say on the service resistance number, it is not factually accurate that 90% of people accepted housing within the vicinity of Branham Lane. There is a large misunderstanding many members of the community unfortunately have based on a previous discussion at the council that I should have corrected at the time. The last time we asked for an update on data, in the vicinity of the site, 10% of people encamped there were still refusing shelter after repeated offers, and well over 20% of people had left the vicinity. And so we continue to have over 30% of the people who were identified through 90 days of outreach before the site opened who have not moved into the site. Now, that doesn't mean that everyone who has left the area is refusing shelter. We don't know why someone would leave the area. Could be that they found shelter somewhere else. It could be that they wanted to be left alone. It could be that they did not want to come indoors. It could be it could be that they found another exit. Could be anything. But I want to be really clear that just because at that moment we were down to only 10% of people still there in the vicinity refusing shelter, that we had therefore moved 90% of people had said yes. As I previously mentioned, whether the number is 10, 20, or 30%, I actually think the repeated refusal of shelter is the exact signal we should focus on for intervention, because it is one of the best signs we have that someone has a serious behavioral health issue. I also want to just note, and then we'll move on factually. So while we were well over 30% of people in the area who did not come indoors, and we do in fact bring up major policy initiatives at the beginning of the budget cycle, it is also worth just noting that we do not separate parents from children with the interim housing solutions we're building. We're adding over 1,000 placements this year, mostly individual rooms with doors that lock. We just opened a site with doors that lock, private bathrooms, and kitchenettes. They are apartments. We are not separating families. And I will just ask Chief quickly to clarify. I assume in whatever discretion officers are using in our encampments, when we were looking at the variety of quality of life crimes that may be committed, from trespassing to property damage to accumulation of trash, dumping into the creek, officers are instructed to use their judgment and discretion, act with compassion, and look at mitigating circumstances, and are certainly not in the business of punishing mothers with children who have no alternative. Is that fair to say?
More than fair to say. I mean, obviously we have discretion in our enforcement actions when it comes to misdemeanors, and that's a very sympathetic individual that you described, Councilmember. And I mean, we would try everything imaginable to not arrest that woman and her son. And so that's there's always that discretion for the officers.
Great. And when we say that we are contemplating updating our code of conduct which is not our ordinance, it's not city law, but our protocols to say that should someone repeatedly refuse to come indoors, that could be one signal handed off from outreach teams to PD for engagement and potential intervention, that we would not believe that it is a sufficient offer of shelter if a mother could not take her child with her. Is that fair to say? We wouldn't consider that to be an actual, and maybe Eric, you want to point to that. When we talk about offering someone shelter, it needs to be safe, dignified, viable, and work for them, which is why we work with unhoused residents to design low barrier shelters.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. All right,
Mayor,
let's
if I may-
continue. I'm going to go to Council.
Just, can I share a quick point of information? Because
Sure.
in the 30% that you're talking about, this includes people who were not found, people who moved to other
Correct.
shelter. And so the 30% figure is not people saying no to shelter. And you may argue 10, 20, 30%, it doesn't matter, but I think it does, because we're misleading the public in thinking that people are saying no, when
So
the reality is that-
Actually, the data we had, just to be really clear, was the original round of outreach. We had an excess of 30 people in the vicinity saying no to shelter.
and when we
And
have
that was
new
a
data.
first, let me finish on what the facts are here.
Yeah, your sentence interrupted mine. So when we have, misleading data in the media, it is very hurtful to the case. And when we have early iterations of data that aren't telling the full story, it's dangerous to use those numbers. So.
Okay, that's an opinion. I want to be really clear about the data. We repeatedly have outreach data, including at this site, that shows a very large percentage, in this case over 30%, at Guadalupe River here, when we did an encampment resolution grant funded by the state, nearly 50% of people refusing shelter. You are absolutely correct that with repeated outreach, we do see that number come down. All I clarified, which is factually true, is that it does not hold that when only 10% of people in the area are still refusing shelter 90 days later, that we have therefore housed 90%. We have found a number of people in these vicinities will choose to move on rather than have repeat engagement when we are telling people that we are going to impose a no encampment zone. This is hard data. This is actual experience from outreach teams out there. This is not at one site. We often see service resistance at 20, 30, 40, even 50% of an encampment. With repeated outreach, we do see it come down as we build trust with people. It is also true that a lot of people choose to move elsewhere to avoid that repeat contact and knowing that a no encampment zone is coming. All of this can be true at the same time. All I wanted to get on the record to be really clear, because I actually think it was misinterpreted a couple of months ago, is that we did not move successfully 90% of the people in that area indoors. We're lucky if we got 2/3 of the folks. In fact, it was probably closer to 50% who were in the vicinity of Branham Lane to come indoors. So I just want us to be rooted in the real data and what we see, and we can talk to our outreach teams. It is challenging. It's not the majority of people, but it is a substantial portion of people who repeatedly say no or move on. My only argument is that's a sign that we need to intervene and get someone into treatment or some other form of help. I don't think it's okay to simply say, that's okay, that's your civil liberty. But we should be clear about the data. All right, I'm going to go to...
Yeah, I'll just say we can finish this conversation offline, because
Great.
when something is happening in my district, I like to have the correct data and information to share with our
Great.
constituents.
Why don't
Thank
we
you.
meet offline with our housing department to get you that data? Let's go to Councilmember Kameh.
Thank you. I want to follow up on what Vice Mayor Foley mentioned to our Chief Sapien regarding the fee. And I know we're going to cover it on the fees, but you and I have spoken regarding some of the issues in my district where senior citizens especially are concerned. They have misinformation about whether or not they should continue calling 911 because they're going to be charged, or, I keep telling them, no, we're not an insurance company. We're not going to deny you, the ability to get services. So I think that sooner rather than later is going to be important in letting the public know that, you continue to call 911 just like you always do, and that you will be served by the city. So there's a unfortunate sort of rumor next door that, I think has some people frightened. So the sooner we kind of like, roll it out, the better it's going to be. Even though we're not going to initiate it till next year, I think that giving the comfort to people to let them know that, no, we're still here to serve you is very important. I wanted to ask, we brought up the Mission Street Recovery Center, and I was curious, what is their capacity?
I believe they have 20 plus beds. I think it's 22, and I'm not sure if anybody's got that exact number. 27, I'm being told.
27.
And I know that they're looking to expand. And I know that the county tells us that it's underutilized and that they are constantly encouraging us to bring folks there and find ways for us to get more people in there. So I'm hoping that all these things will align and that it will be a good relationship for us and them, and most importantly, the people that we're bringing there.
Yeah, I guess I had thought, and maybe I should get more information on what they are and are not. I thought they were sort of a sobering center or something like that. But if they're able to get services, that would be good to know what they provide there. My question on your neighborhood quality of life, one of the things I was wondering about, when the trust program came out, one of the things we realized that it wasn't just trying to divert some of the 911 calls to 988, but that we would have behavioral health specialists. And, given how difficult it is to find police officers to begin with, I'm just wondering why we didn't go the route of maybe having a trust-like group deal with some of the behavioral health issues on those who are most resistant or most whatever, or can't accept shelter or whatever it is. Because I think that I could understand the enhanced engagement program, because that's some outreach that we had been doing. But in terms of putting law enforcement as opposed to those that maybe need more specialized services, I'm just wondering why we didn't go the route of the trust model.
Well, we do have many of the types of services you're describing. We have our mobile crisis assessment team, which is dealing with calls for service where it's evident from the outset that there's going to be some sort of mental health component to the call. And they do work all throughout the city, including a lot of work in the homeless community. We have our PERT program, which is our psychiatric emergency response team, in which a San Jose police officer is riding in a vehicle with a clinician from County Behavioral Health Services, which gives us that immediate assessment capability at first contact. And I think that all of these things combined, like one of the council directions was look at what San Diego is doing. And San Diego created sort of that blended co-response team like you're describing, but I think for us, we have some alternative responses, we have some blended responses, and what the housing department is doing is coordinating that outreach with us, with these other service providers, with County Behavioral Health, and then ultimately, look, the bottom line is we are the last resort. Just like in an abatement today, regardless of whether or not anything changes in the budget, if there's an abatement and somebody says, I'm not going, the only people that are going to change that are the police by making a trespassing arrest. So really, the dynamic isn't changing in that sense.
Mm-hmm. So I guess the way that it has been described doesn't sound like you're the last resort. So I'm glad you said that. I thought that maybe sort of like a in between what housing does and what the trust program does is really trying to, because I don't know, 27 sounds like not that many beds, but if you say they're underutilized, well, I guess that's okay. I don't know if you're talking about a lot of people, a little bit of people, or what that is, but to me it seems like sort of something in between, like the trust program perhaps, maybe, and maybe that's what your team is doing in the housing department. Maybe you can clarify.
So what the trust program does is different than what our outreach workers do. There are some areas of overlap and similarity, but their work is distinguished from the work that our outreach workers engage in. And what we're proposing here through the enhanced engagement outreach is to really bring that work again further earlier on in the process so we can build longer term relationships with individuals and encampments and provide and give access to a broader array of services.
I guess one of the things that I'm wondering about is, and of course, all of this is rather new in terms of the proposal, but I just imagine that if we don't have something in between the last resort and what you're hoping to achieve from housing, then we'll have sort of a cycle where people get dropped off at the Mission Street Recovery Center, and it's sort of a cycle, right? Some people do, go to other places, or they get reunited with family members or whatever. But I guess because we're so strained in our police officers, I was thinking, even expanding more housing as opposed to waiting until you arrest someone might be also a way of thinking about solving the issues. If PD is the last resort, then would putting more in the housing outreach be a better vehicle? I just put that out there as something to think about, because I do know that we don't have that many officers, right? And so I just think that we ought to think about whether or not it would be something that we could consider.
Yes, Councilmember, and just to clarify, as part of what is proposed in the presentation in the earlier slide, we will be expanding the outreach team to create this subset component called the Enhanced Engagement Team, and that will look to be a total of 3 new additional FTEs and working with other departments and consolidating some additional teams into there. So there will be additional FTEs added to initiative to do that earlier on engagement prior to, as the chief had mentioned, sort of their last resort engagement.
Yeah, okay. And then I just want to confirm what I heard to make sure it's correct. So under the Code of Conduct, since it's an administrative practice, what I heard is that we have no legal authority. Is that correct?
So the Code of Conduct does not itself have legal authority. It's not a law. I can't, our officers can't arrest somebody for not maintaining a 12 by 12 by 12 encampment. But what it does is it's a tool, and if John Cicerelli, if I'm misstating this at all, but it's a tool that PRNS is using to sort of prioritize which campsites are in need of abatement and which can wait.
Yeah, thank you. And I didn't want to let Ray Reardon think that we forgot about him. So I just wanted to ask, your budgeted amount is less than previous years, and I'm just wondering why.
It's because of Ray Reardon, Director of the Office of Emergency Management. Good question. It's because we don't have some of the grants coming in that we had before. So years past, for example, we had $1 million grant from the state to purchase equipment.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councilmember. Let me turn now to Councilmember Cohen.
Thank you, and I want to start by thanking our public safety team. Our residents rely on these teams every day for keeping our community safe. We've had 3 major fires in District 4 just in the last few days, including a major one up at the mobile home park that, unfortunately, we lost 4 mobile homes in West Wind. So we really appreciate the quick response and the strong work that your teams do when they to keep people safe and try to reduce the effects when these things happen in some of our dense neighborhoods. I also want to acknowledge our IPA, Eddie, there. You're here for the first time through the budget process, and I apologize. We won't have any questions for you probably, but thank you for being here. He's got his report. His annual report's coming up. Oh, okay, good. This conversation has been frustrating. Obviously, I expressed a lot of my thoughts about it the first time we talked about it during the March budget message. We do have as the mayor said, we have a very large unhoused population. Unfortunately, I suspect it's about to get much larger due to no fault of our own. So we ought to be really thoughtful about how we approach it, and I know we have been, and I'm appreciative of the work that the team does every day on the ground. I want to thank Councilmember Campos for her comments on the responsibility to shelter proposal. I have very similar concerns, which I think are valid concerns, that we haven't had time to fully understand the implications of this policy. And we should keep in mind that every policy that we introduce is a statement of our values as a city, and we should be thoughtful about what that means as we do it. When I was asking for some more of a deliberative process back in March, that unfortunately, six of my colleagues didn't agree with at the time, one thing that I asked for, and I think we all agreed on, was setting up a city and county meeting publicly with our board and the council so we can all talk to each other and understand the services that we all provide. So I want to ask the city manager, I know you've done some outreach, how that's coming, because I feel it's premature to start making some of these decisions without having that conversation.
Thank you very much for the question. Yes, I sent the county exec a letter on that, and subsequently Assistant City Manager Lee Wilcox and the assistant over at the county have had some discussions. Lee, could you bring the council up to date on the latest of the discussions about having a joint meeting? Because we're supposed to, your request was to have it in June. Go ahead, Lee.
Sure, and we did offer them June 24th, which is a council meeting that we yet haven't canceled. So we threw that over to them. I expect to hear later this week. I would imagine in all likelihood this is something that'll probably happen after summer, given kind of what's happening at the county and a lot of the federal funding. So I think the ability for county staff and city staff to pull off something by the 24th is quite ambitious, but they seem very committed to a joint meeting in the next 60 to 90 days.
Okay, I appreciate that. I still consider this to be a bit out of order in the sense that meeting with the county, I believe, has to happen first because of the reliance on the services they'll provide to make what we do effective. And, we want to make sure that we're doing this in partnership and not in opposition to their vision for how we're handling this issue. I do want to just tell a little story as I move forward in my comments. A couple weeks ago, I had a community office hours in my district, and we had an unhoused person come and participate as a resident member of the public. They are members of our public. He was a very nice young man who talked about his experiences on the street and talked to me about wanting help from the city and hoping that we can provide him a place for shelter. In the meantime, we've continued to have conversations with this person. We've forwarded that information to the housing department. We're trying to hopefully find him a place. But I just bring this up to point out that we're not yet at a point where we have satisfied the need of the people who want service. And so I continue to get frustrated by this idea that somehow we have vacant spaces around, that we're needing to take action now because everybody who wants service has received it, and now we're dealing with people who don't want service. So I just want us to understand that we're not anywhere close to that point yet. I asked questions the previous time of the chief about what our tools are currently, and we know we have tools now because we've just done it through Olive and other ways we've abated people. We did an abatement up at 237, which, the effects are something that my district is dealing with quite heavily, and I've expressed my frustration in the past about the outcome of that. I think homelessness in District 4 has only gotten worse, even though I'm very proud of the work that we've done to house many folks living in RVs in the Barry SSA parking site. Homelessness in District 4 has actually gotten worse in the last month, and that continues to be the case. And what we seem to be focused on is a very limited set of areas around the city, areas that we've called no encampment zones, which we've done in order to placate folks who live near EIH sites because they're frustrated that there's still homelessness in their community. While we have now neighborhoods scattered throughout, I'm sure the entire city, but certainly in my district, which are not designated no encampment zones, which are not near interim housing sites, which, to be frank, don't get the attention of the staff of the city that other sites are getting and that this policy is geared towards. So I'm skeptical that this will move the needle at all in my district by creating this extra level of just something else in our ordinances, which, and as we know, many people are frustrated that we have ordinances on the books that we still don't even enforce. I mean, the reason I think we've gotten into our situation with RV parking and other things is that we've kind of stopped enforcing a 72-hour parking rule as a city. So adding more ordinances that are hard to enforce, I'm not convinced does anything more than being performative. Let me ask a question, though, of the chief. I think maybe you're the right person to ask this. And I think there was some, Councilmember Campos kind of alluded to this. What is the long-term outcome? For a person who is cited and brought into, whether it's to Mission Street or to somewhere else, where is the long-term outcome for this individual? They will be provided some help, and maybe our hope is that some of them will will start to understand that there's a service there for them that they can accept. But once they've been there for a few days, will they end up just being released back out into the street? What will be the outcome?
Are you asking if they make it to the Mission Street Recovery Station?
Mission Street or wherever they end up going as part of this ordinance, what's the outcome beyond that, the next step beyond that point?
So, with any arrest, the next decision becomes, will the person remain in custody? And that always is dependent upon a whole variety of factors. But assuming that it's just simply a trespassing arrest, then the answer to that question is no. Then the next question after that is, will there be prosecution? So if it's a municipal code violation, then that prosecution would be done by the city attorney's office. If it was a penal code violation or something else, then it would be up to the district attorney to make a decision as to whether or not there would be prosecution. Then after that, what is the outcome in court? And then after that, what is the, assuming it results in a conviction, what are the terms of,
I think I think you answered before that it's very unlikely that many of these will actually go to a case of prosecution. Now, as Councilmember Ortiz pointed out, I think we all very strongly believe that if somebody violates the penal code, or if there's people who are exhibiting behaviors where police intervention is necessary and prosecution is necessary, and I certainly want to do all we can to try to get cooperation from whether it's the district attorney's office or the county to make sure that folks are dealt with appropriately when they violate the penal code. But we're talking about the case of the trespassing ordinance where they're brought into custody. It seems to me, and maybe you can show me an alternate path, it seems to me that at the end of some process, more likely than not, they'll be back on the street at the end. Is that fair?
Well, ultimately, of course, it's not a life sentence. They're going to be most likely released from custody immediately after even if we book them into jail, and then even if they were brought to court and the conviction was simply for a trespass, the amount of time they would spend in custody is not going to be great, if at all. And I don't know that that's necessarily the point of what is trying to be achieved here. I think it's at all cost, or with all effort to try to connect somebody to some sort of services that can make a difference in their life in a positive way. Again, I often refer to the police as sort of the social service provider of last resort. Like everything else has failed, and now we have a law violation, and we're going to take some action. And even then, after that point, we're still going to try to find some outcome other than just simply a punitive outcome for that arrestee.
Okay. And my next comment will be more directed towards folks in the audience and many of the advocates, folks who we work with all the time, who care about the folks on the street like we all do. But I also, I feel like it's important to say there's some responsibility on your end as well, because the pressure on this council to take action and to deal with what's on the streets in our neighborhoods is great. And as long as there's a feeling out there that people are being advised not to take the services we're offering them, these are the kind of reactions that will occur. So I think it's important to make sure that folks in this room, and many of you, know when I interact with many of you, we talk about this one-on-one, that you are not advising folks on the street not to accept services that we've, I believe, done quite a great job in this city of making flexible and having variety of options and allowing people to have low barrier entry and grow as people. So there's some responsibility of everybody in this, and not just us up here and not just the staff in that box, but everybody in this room, to make sure people understand we're in this together and we're trying to help. So I just want to make that point as well, as I push back on this policy a little bit. Last question I have for you, Chief. You're creating what you're calling a neighborhood quality of life unit. Can you talk a little bit about the funding for that? We have a fixed number of officers. certainly we're trying to increase our recruitment, but that's irrespective of this program. We know we need more patrol, we need more foot patrol, we need more downtown work, we need a lot of things in the city. Our residents are clamoring for visibility of officers in our neighborhoods. Can you talk about what we are sacrificing as this police department by taking what I think said 7 FTU and dedicating it to this unit?
So in order to do some work that we're not currently doing, I had one of three choices. Either we do this work entirely on an overtime basis, which the drawback for doing it that way is that we have so many things that we do on overtime and so many overtime opportunities that the majority of them go unfilled. So I can post the job and hope that an officer and a sergeant and everybody signs up to do it, but I can't guarantee that they will. So that's the drawback for doing it on a completely overtime basis. The other option is to pull a sergeant and 6 officers out of our patrol structure. And as you know, I have to have a minimum number of patrol officers on duty every day to make sure that the public is safe and that they are safe. And so if I pull 7 people out of patrol, then I'd have to backfill those spots with overtime. Now, in that situation, I can mandate people to work the spots, but that's not ideal to hold somebody over for an extra 6 hours at the end of their, having already worked 10 hours if no one signs up for the overtime. So the third option is to find officers that are assigned somewhere within the department that I could move their positions into this unit that wouldn't have a tremendous impact on our ability to do our 2 most primary functions, which are 1, answer calls for service, and 2, conduct follow-up investigations. And so that's where we arrived at the 6 officers and 1 sergeant position that are being moved to this.
It surprises me to see that we would say at this point, after all the years of austerity, that we still feel like we have officers that are in our department that wouldn't be a great loss to our community if they get reassigned. But I mean, that'll be something for us to think about in the next month. I see that I think based on the conversation you and I had, at least 2 of these officers will be coming from the Megan's Law Enforcement Division. I think folks I've talked to are a little concerned about that. I'm not sure. I mean, I know you've tried to explain this to me. I'm not sure I'm comfortable yet with the idea that something like that would be let go in order to do something else. If you wanted to make a brief comment about that before I yield my time, give up my rest of my time.
Sure. So I'm not saying that we have 6 officers and a sergeant that are doing something that's not important. Obviously, of course it's important, or they wouldn't be there, but it's not going directly to either answering calls for service, which is the #1 thing we have to be responsible for doing, or conducting follow-up investigations on crimes that have occurred. I mean, those are our 2 most basic functions. And so when the Megan's Law team was created, which was almost 25 years ago, we had 1,400 police officers, and I think we staffed it with something like 8 officers and a sergeant, and they were proactive, and they conducted proactive investigations to ensure that registered sex offenders lived at the address in which they claimed to live, and if they didn't, they would seek a warrant for their arrest and then seek to apprehend them. When we went through the Measure B pension battles of 10 or 15 years ago, and the department went from 1,400 to 850, many units were eliminated altogether, and the ones that weren't were pared way down, including this one. And so all those officers are really capable of doing right now is processing some of the required registration paperwork for the 290 registrants and assisting elsewhere in the Special Victims Unit where they can. So if by removing those 2 people from that assignment, it's really not changing what that unit is capable of. Honestly, it's staffed with so few people at this point anyway that it can't do what it was originally intended to do, much like many units in the department.
Okay. I mean, like everything, this is a trade-off. This is, as you said, a pared down unit that will be pared down further by making this change. I just want to make sure that that's clear and understood. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Councilmember. I do think it's worth noting that the bargaining units representing both police and fire immediately and early jumped in strong support of the idea that we should not wait to say that we must have a housing placement for every person on our streets before we can actually try to intervene in cycles of addiction, mental illness, and try to get people into care. I think I would ask our frontline staff who experience every day the challenges of trying to get people the help that they need. And I think 2 things can be true at the same time, and we can have 2 or 3 very different populations out on our streets. Let me turn now to Councilmember Condelis.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief Sapian and everyone in the box for this presentation. I also want to thank and appreciate the comments from some of my colleagues, so I won't repeat some of their questions. I do want to start with Eric and the enhanced engagement program proposal. Earlier I asked about the contracts. I mean, what does compressed contracts mean? What does compressed third-party contracts look like? I mean, I know the term, but realistically in implementation and what we're trying to achieve is where I'm asking.
So we would reduce the total value of the contract annual expenditures about 50% is what we're projecting, in order to, one, recoup savings, as we now already have an expanded outreach program, and this would add additional outreach workers to full-time staff. And then two, it would allow us to get more consistency as well as validity in the data collection that we are doing in response to our engagement work.
Got it. And I would assume the enhanced collaboration with our departments internally would obviously be beneficial. Okay, so one of the duties, number 4, as stated in slide 13, is to ID individuals posing significant health and safety risks to the neighborhood, those who are severely mental health or substance abuse issues, and chronic service resistance. All right, we ID, what happens then?
Once we're able to collect information on those individuals, where we can make offers of shelter, because what we would look to do with the total amount of supply that we would have on board by the end of the calendar year is have a percentage that are set aside for the most immediate and urgent cases. And so we would look to make those offers immediately. We would track the making of those offers, and where, for any number of reasons, whether the person who's engaged with is not able to make informed decisions, or whether the person we are engaging with is unwilling to come in, as those lots of people reject shelter for whatever reasons there may be, and legitimate reasons they may be, we're able to track that as well. So we're able to
better tracking.
That. Exactly.
Right. All right. Better data.
Correct.
Okay. And okay, I see that. Let's see. A question for Chief Joseph. Along the streets of the Mission Bay, the Mission Street recovery option, or what we're proposing, it's my understanding that recovery is strictly voluntary as well, correct?
So people can go there on a voluntary basis, but like I mentioned earlier, we do have an MOU with the county that allows us to take people actually on 3 different types of offenses. Public intoxication, so if they were arrested for a violation of 647F of the penal code, first-time DUI offenders, and then low-level drug offenders, possession or under the influence or possession of paraphernalia. So what we're hoping to do is expand our MOU with the county, our existing MOU, to allow for other misdemeanor arrestees to also be brought there.
Got it. And it makes sense. And I think the key to that is the county agreeing and us being able to work on that MOU with the county, or the contract modifications that we have in place, in order to enable us this additional tool for this service resistant, I would imagine, individual. Okay. Let's see. I have to make sure I'm not repeating some of the questions of my colleagues, but I think ultimately, I think I do appreciate the fact that we're bringing our outreach in-house, and the fact that we want to see better data and better outcomes for folks who are out on the street. I think, we are investing so much money into alternative shelter options. Earlier it was 1,400 units that we're bringing on in the next year, but I think this level of investment is unseen to even those who are unhoused. Folks in our community who are suffering from homelessness have never seen the units that we're bringing on board, and our enforcement of a type of shelter, responsibility to shelter policy prior to the full engagement and the full rollout of all the new units and all the different housing types that we're going to have available. I think at this point feels a little premature. We haven't even let our program run its course. We haven't even finished building all 1,400 units and offered placement for people. And so, I would, double down on all the work that needs to happen in collaboration with the county, and take and utilize this opportunity and this time while we build these 1,400 units that Matt's probably in the Stand Director for Public Works, that should be coming online in the next 5 months, 6 months, to make sure that we are enabling our processes with the county and ultimately for the successful outcomes of our residents. And it's frustrating. This is an easy task, and by no means you know, are we going to solve this issue overnight. I mean, we all saw the Times piece where with Governor Newsom releasing model ordinances. But you know, I will close with this statement is, you know, no one should face criminal punishment for sleeping outside when they have nowhere else to go. And so I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Councilor. I think that's something we all agree on, and that is our current policy and would continue to be under any updates to the code of conduct we're describing here. Appreciate your questions. Let me ask a couple. It was good to see our city safety perception start to improve a little year over year in the data. Looks like we went from top line 55% to 66%, so we're moving in a slightly better direction there. I appreciate all the collective effort that's gone into that. Many different things, as we know. It's addressing crime, it's faster 911 response times, it's addressing blight, it's a lot of different factors. It's community engagement and all the rest. Chief Sapien, I know we have a new metric that is intended to track wildfire preparedness. Could you share a little more about how we think we will? And I know we'll soon have a study session dedicated to that topic, but how will we measure our preparedness?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, strategic goal 2.1 says prepare the community for emergencies through public safety and education. So that is principally how we go about educating the public on how to create defensible space and preparedness for wildland. Under the performance measure, it does talk about % change in fire incidents. That's not really a reliable way of looking at how we're delivering on that public education. So the metric will likely look more like % of residences in fire hazard severity zones reached with our education processes. We know now that we have, based on new maps, about 27,000 residences in those areas from the medium to very high hazard range. So I think a metric that looks for how effectively and how broadly we're reaching that subset of our community is going to be important.
Thanks, Chief. Great. Glad to see us put a little more focus there. Look forward to the study session. Chief Joseph, I've heard that the county intends to defund the PERT program that has a clinician go out. Now, the city pays for at least one of these teams. We have a county clinician out on our dime doing engagement with and embedded or co-response with our department, as we see other cities doing. Can you tell us any more about the county's intention to defund the PERT team?
So my understanding is, and we haven't been directly contacted at the police department from anyone from the county saying your PERT clinician is coming back to us, but my understanding is that there are 4 PERT clinicians throughout the county. They're going to bring them all back and make them part of the mobile crisis response team. And as you point out, the city of San Jose pays the salary of the one PERT clinician who rides with the San Jose police officer, so I would imagine that would not continue were they to do that. And if, in fact, they did pull that clinician back, that would effectively be the end of the program because we can't do it without partnership with the county's behavioral health services.
Thanks, Chief. Do you have concerns about the loss of that resource for our police department and the ability to have a trained clinician embedded with an SJPD unit?
I would prefer that we maintain that capability. I mean, it was a partnership long in the making and a program that has been successful. And we hoped actually to have 2 clinicians. It's very difficult to find clinicians willing to do the work, but we did find one, and he's effective and enjoys his job quite a bit and has been doing a great work out there. And we'd like to keep him, but ultimately it's not going to be our decision.
Okay, well that seems like an opportunity for advocacy for all of us and those in the audience here too. I think I've visited with that team and see a lot of value in having a trained clinician embedded within PD. Offers a very valuable perspective on the ground. Along those lines, as we've tried to figure out how to move closer to and align with our county around our overall service delivery model related to public safety, addiction, mental illness, homelessness, et cetera. Jennifer, I understand you have sent the request over to James Williams asking to collaborate on having a trained behavioral health professional embedded within 911 dispatch centers to improve our call diversion to an alternative response, those 988 transfers. Have you received a response?
Yes, well, per council direction and as a follow-up to a June 2024 letter that I had sent the county exec on the exact same subject, because I had not heard back, I sent a letter dated April 3rd to the county executive reiterating our request to embed county behavioral health services department clinicians in our 911 center. On April 30th, I did receive a response from the county exec expressing openness to the meeting with the city to discuss our request. They also requested to discuss other opportunities to improve our collective emergency response system, such as how we implement statewide protocols for 911 to 988 transfers, and how we increase community awareness of 988. However, despite the openness for the meeting, I am not optimistic that the county will ultimately grant our request. I believe a primary concern from the letter that I received back from them is that the county says they have a shortage of licensed behavioral health clinicians needed in the county's 998 mobile response functions. Also, the county exec stated that in his letter that in the behavioral health system of care, licensed behavioral health clinicians are most effectively deployed either at the 988 call centers or in the field, not triaging emergency medical services calls for the city's dispatchers. So with that statement, I'm not very optimistic that they will heed our request. However, we will be having a meeting with them. They gave me a contact, and that meeting will be forthcoming.
All right, I'm glad you're continuing to have the conversation. I appreciate you advocating for this and continuing to engage. I think when we gave that direction as a council, agreed that we saw a lot of value in better aligning city and county resources coming out of our 911 call analysis, the goal being to divert calls where an officer with a badge and a gun is not necessarily the most appropriate first responder, and if we can divert 911 calls to a county team, to a health response, we would love to do that. For that to work, though, we do need the county to meet us halfway and provide resources, be extremely helpful to our police and fire departments to have that county-trained expert embedded in a 911 center to help deal with incoming calls and help with the real-time decisions around triage. We have a tremendous volume of hundreds of thousands of calls and really need that support. And I'm concerned to hear that we are hearing from our county partners that they do not have enough trained clinicians to meet that service need at this time, regardless, it sounds like. So we'll have to keep engaging. And I know we're having a lot of conversations offline with our county counterparts, but important to close the loop with our council and the public along the way and keep people up to date. Chief Joseph, just a follow-up to that, I believe we've had some data in the past. We did that 911 analysis on the percentage of calls eligible for transfer diversion and a sense of how many we currently divert.
Yes, so it's hard to say. The county has provided some criteria for when they would be willing to have, or they believe a call should be transferred to 988. And some of it is easy to understand. Some of it requires some decision-making on the part of call takers that I'm not sure is really within their job description to be able to make. So we're working with the county to try to narrow it down a little bit. So two of the criteria are if a caller has suicidal ideations with no immediate risk to harm themselves or others. That's an easy one. That's pretty clear by what they're telling you. The next one is caller does not have access to necessary mental health medications or is experiencing issues due to mental health medications. Again, that's fairly clear. But the third one, the caller is possibly experiencing a mental health crisis. This could include conditions such as psychosis, mania, or depression, or other mental health or substance use disorders. Now you're asking someone who's not a trained clinician. I mean, I don't even know exactly what the clinical definition of mania is. And so I don't know that without a little bit more clear direction, which we're trying to get, we're going to be transferring a whole lot of calls based on that. So again, we're working with the county to define that a little more narrowly. Additionally, our communications manager, Jennifer Hearn, is working on a new protocol for the answering of the calls to have us now, ask, do you have a police, fire, medical, or mental health emergency? That fourth question is something that we haven't traditionally asked, and that could possibly direct us to something where we can transfer a call to 988. But interestingly, I would point out, just to kind of explain the difficulty in triaging these things, that for the city-funded trust team, in other words, the team that is paid for by the city of San Jose, that only works within our city limits, 15% of the time they respond in the field, they actually call back to 911 for either police, fire, or medical response. And that doesn't mean that we're doing anything.
Sorry, can you give that stat again? Say it again.
Sure. And this is data from the county. 15% of the time that the city-funded trust team responds to a caller in the field, the trust team actually calls back to 911 to get either a police, fire, or medical response. That doesn't mean that we're improperly transferring calls. That doesn't mean they're improperly responding to calls or that trust is making bad decisions about what they should or should not go on. It just highlights the difficulty of assessing correctly over the telephone exactly what you're going to encounter when you get to a location. So again, this is extremely difficult work. We're trying our best. We do not want to be an obstacle in any way to sending someone other than the police to a particular need for service. In fact, just the opposite. The more of these situations we could give to a better equipped, better trained, more appropriate responder, I mean, I can't do it fast enough. We just need to be able to do it properly.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I think there's a real consensus amongst our council as well on that topic. That 15% number is really interesting and actually points to me to the need to keep a PERT-like co-response where we actually can both respond with a clinician, a therapeutic response, but also have it co-responded to with one of our first responders, given that 15% of calls are inefficiently yielding a response that then is a call back to PD to actually come out anyway. That's interesting. Okay. And then for advocacy options, again, for everybody here, including council colleagues, both that embedded clinician in 311 to help with call diversions, a great opportunity for us all to work together to achieve greater call diversion rates, and then the PERT team, as we discussed. Let me continue. A couple other final questions here. Jennifer, appreciate you working very hard to help secure funding from Valley Water for those watershed Coyote Creek and Guadalupe River patrols. And I'm curious, maybe this is a question for the chief or Eric, how do those patrols along that area where we have to comply with our stormwater permit, big subject of conversation here over the last year or so, how does that interface with the overhaul of outreach, updating and actually beginning to enforce the code of conduct, something we've been talking about for a couple of years now? How does that add to that overall puzzle?
So the bike patrols along the Coyote and the Guadalupe Creeks, they're out there every day. They're seeing what's going on. The areas that have been cleared by PRNS as part of the waterway abatements to ensure that the waterways are clean are no return zones, and they're vast. So there are small no return zones around the various places throughout the city in which there's either an EIH facility or a safe sleeping site or an RV parking site or something like that. But now you're talking about 12 miles of waterway. That's a lot of territory. So the bike patrols can both help us direct resources if we do need to move folks. They can help remind people that that's not a place to camp. But basically they're just a group of officers that are going to be in those no return zones on a daily basis, seeing what's going on and helping us assure that they're not re-encamped.
Okay. Thanks, Chief. Appreciate that. And then finally, I noticed in the funding for to Office of Emergency Management for software to enhance disaster preparedness, emergency response, and I think there was mention of supporting homeless initiatives. And Ray, I was just hoping you could elaborate on how that technology ties in, just given the description.
Yes, thank you for the question. Ray Reardon, Director of the Office of Emergency Management. The software does many things for emergency management, a collection of damage data, et cetera, in this tool, but it also provides the ability to gather and evaluate multiple sources of information, and we had an opportunity to work with Omar Passons and his team to evaluate how this data could be collected to enhance our understanding of the value of data and where encampments are located, where they're moving to, which would give us more information and a predictive model to determine what perhaps future locations would be encamped by the same personnel, just as a way of enhancing our ability to track data.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ray. That's helpful. Okay, let me turn, we're going second round. We'll keep it to 5 minutes each, and we'll go to Councilmember Campos.
Thank you. I appreciate my colleagues and their comments and questions on this important CSA, and since we are voting on the responsibility to shelter ordinance next month, and we know that it's essential to have partnership from the county, such as our district attorney's office, our county courts, our sheriff, our public defenders, I want to understand, maybe this is a question to our city manager, what is the commitment that we have from the county to implement and enforce this, given that we are voting on it next month? Or maybe it's a question for our city attorney.
Yeah, I think that's more of Nora question.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilmember Nora Freeman, City Attorney. We are scheduling meetings. We've had a lot of meetings with the DA's office, and we've walked through how some of the court diversion programs work, and we've had our own experience being in court on municipal code violations. And we're trying to understand what interests the courts may have, public defender may have, county services may have in assisting with the diversion hopes that we have. The public defender's office, we understand from the DA's office that the public defender's office basically sees some of the diversion programs as not something they're going to be supportive of, and that a court may just dismiss the client. And I'm a lawyer, I respect their role. Their role is adversarial to a prosecutor role. And what we'd like to have a conversation about is, rather than just having a dismissal and then perhaps another citation or arrest and another round in court, how can we come up with perhaps agreement on those folks who could benefit from some of the services that can be provided by the courts or through the county? A big question that needs to be answered is what is the availability of those services, and how do we prioritize? And some of this, in looking at a policy, which is what we were asked to do and bring ideas forward, how do we prioritize people who everyone might agree could benefit, and bring those folks into this type of program and system? So we've got a lot of talking to do between now and June as we've tried to put together some of our ideas and get some background information and things like that. This is new for my office, it's new for the city by and large, and folks in my office who are doing the prosecuting. It's not fun to just go into court and try to get a criminal sentence, and they truly would like to see a more positive result given their role with the city. So we'll know more come June, and we're going to continue our discussions. But right now, we're not at a commitment level from the county.
And meetings are great to know that we're having that conversation, but not having certainty with a key partnership like our county offices is concerning to me. And you know, as I said earlier, we're working on problems that began decades ago, before any of us were on the dais. And so for those of us who are just getting started on council, we are the ones who are going to see the impacts of this policy and a budget that omits ongoing funding for affordable housing production, which we know is a way to solve for homelessness. So I think that it's important that we take into consideration how fast we're moving on a policy that still has so many pieces yet to be addressed and solved for. And reiterating some of my colleagues' comments, we haven't even allowed for the emergency interim housing that is in our pipeline to be open, accessible, and available to the people living on our streets. So I just caution us to proceed, you know, with the level of detailed thinking that is going to help us really understand how potentially a well-intended policy, because I know that the intention is to make our city a place where people aren't suffering on the streets. If that is the goal, there are many ways to reach that goal, especially policies that have been proven to be effective. And so I will just, again, caution on a policy that doesn't have demonstrated metrics for success, either in this community or other communities, and again, with less than a month to make a decision without strongly securing the partnerships that would be essential to an effective policy. So, thank you.
Thanks, Councilmember. I just want to clarify for folks that this approach is in fact one that we've taken for 25 years in our county, and we can go look at our success with our drug court. This is in fact exactly what we did a lot more of prior to Prop 47, and I think that part of what's being obscured in the conversation is the fact that 95% of our money and attention is actually on expanding shelter, expanding housing. This year we're doing a $60 million NOFA for new affordable housing. Most of our dollars over the last few years have gone into the 1,400 new beds of interim housing and shelter that will be brought online this year, mostly with individual rooms with doors that lock, often with en-suite bathrooms, even a kitchenette in some cases. We are spending a lot of time rightly on this particular tool, one of an entire systemic approach. But again, 95% of our money and effort goes into prevention, affordable housing, and interim solutions. That being said, we have seen a lot of success historically with using law enforcement to intervene in cycles of addiction and mental illness to divert people into a behavioral health court. We have a very robust, one of the most robust behavioral health courts in the country. We were a real leader in that area. And I think what we're proposing is to be able to say, look, two things can be true at the same time. Most people need housing, shelter, we'll accept it, and let's put 95% of our money and effort there. At the same time, let's not turn a blind eye to those who are refusing shelter, because that's maybe the best signal we have that somebody needs that intervention. I've mentioned before to folks, some of you may remember, I had a cousin who was on the streets with severe addiction for a couple of years. If you talk to many members of the recovery community, they will say there is no recovery without accountability. So the thinking here is to say, in the smaller number of cases where someone is severely addicted, mentally in some situation where they're repeatedly unable to accept help, there's a duty to intervene, and that's an important signal. And whether we can get them to the Mission Street Recovery Center or another treatment center is great. If we can't, the fallback is not for the DA to prosecute, not for some criminal charge, but for the city attorney to petition to get the person into a behavioral health court. And yes, we know our county needs to scale up treatment options. We know everything, the entire system needs scale. I mean, we all, on all levels, affordable housing, market rate housing, shelter options, treatment options, but I don't think we should wait sequentially to have all the affordable housing before we build some shelter, before we do some intervention, before we get more treatment beds. We're gonna have to kind of start to map out all of it at once, but be measured in how we do it. No one is going to serve jail time because we didn't have shelter for them. That's not the point of this. In fact, I don't think anyone will serve jail time even if they're refusing shelter. I think the idea is to have an excuse to intervene in a cycle of addiction, get them over to a treatment center, or barring that, if those 27 beds are full, city attorney would have the discretion to say, I'd like to petition to get them into the drug court. But we're gonna have to push on this. And as we've seen historically, meeting after meeting, years of conversations and meetings don't always lead to the outcomes we want. Sometimes it requires action. It requires us to lean in, try new things, push. And if we find that we have a lot more people who need intervention than the county has capacity for, that'll be a great signal for them to pivot to provide more resources. So I acknowledge this is an imperfect approach, as all of ours have been, but I think it starts to get realistic about the reality of addiction on our streets. And I shouldn't need to remind folks of just the events of the last week that help demonstrate just how serious those gaps in the system and that failure to intervene has been. We have a lot more ahead of us. We're not going to get to everything today. I do want to leave room for public comment. We have comment cards. We're not quite there yet. We're going to try to get through at least one more section. So I think we should move on to our next area of content. We will take a maybe 90-second recess for everybody to shuffle in and out of the box. Thank you to everybody who presented today. We will be right back. All right, we are going to come back.
42 cards.
Yeah, not too bad. All right, we're going to come back. Okay, here we go. So we are transitioning now to our study session on strategic support and appointees, and then we may not get to fees and charges today, which is okay, but we're going to get into strategic support and then appointees, and I'll hand it over to staff.
Good afternoon, Mayor Mahan and council and members of the public. Khaled Tawfiq, IT Director and Chief Information Officer. I'm joined today by my colleagues, Maria Oberg, Director of Finance, Aram Kuyomjian, Director of Human Resources and Employee Relations, and last but not least, Matt Lesh, the Director of Public Works. We'll provide a brief presentation for the Strategic Support CSA. The CSA consists of behind-the-scenes key internal support departments and includes finance, human resources, selected public works services, and the information technology department. Some of the programs include payroll and accounts payable managed by finance, recruiting, hiring, and benefits managed by human resources, cybersecurity, the city's 311 customer contact center, and innovative solutions provided the information technology department. I will highlight some of the CSA performance measurements or measures. Bond rating, we are among the highest rated cities in the nation and expect to maintain our rating for the next fiscal year. Employee turnover rate continues to improve, and the trajectory is to reach 6.2 by the end of June. And the estimated 311 customer satisfaction score is currently at 63%, and our target for next year is to reach 70%. The CSA budget summary includes eliminating 1 vacant position in finance, staffing changes resulting in net addition of 3 permanent positions to support the San Jose 311 program, and advancing our data and artificial intelligence initiatives. Overall, the CSA will gain 1 position. The CSA priorities include protect and allocate city financial resources to support community needs, hire and retain talented staff, maintain city services and facilities, and leverage innovative solutions to support city priorities. As stated in my previous slide, the San Jose 311 program is gaining additional resources to enhance services and advance our data and artificial intelligence initiatives. Public Works is adding 2 positions to support Measure T funded facilities. And to offset the cost, we will eliminate the ongoing contribution to the Information Technology Sinking Fund Reserve, and Public Works will eliminate 2 vacant positions and reduce vehicle maintenance and operations funds. In summary, CSA will continue to achieve a strong financial performance for the city's public services, maintain city facilities and resources, ensure a safe, healthy, and well-trained workforce, and promote technical innovations, collaboration, and community engagement for digital, promote technical innovation, collaboration, and community engagement for digital services. This concludes our presentation, and staff is available for questions.
Great, thank you. And Jennifer, just so I'm clear on our run of show, we have a few sections here within strategic support. Are we going on to appointees next, or do we want to pause for questions?
We should pause for questions on the departments, and then on the appointees, there's no presentation. We just take questions if the council has any.
Okay, and then we go to...
Then we're going to go to the...
Sorry, if I could just clarify just slightly, we do have a separate deck for, and we call it the appointees for the conversation on the prioritizing our work.
That's what I was
and-
going to
and
talk
be-
about.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
that
then,
comes
yeah,
after.
but then we'll talk about prioritizing our work and pay for performance after the actual appointee budget questions.
Okay. Okay, so you do want to stop for questions now, if we have any? Okay, so if we have any questions for our departments on their strategic support role, why don't we do that now? Let me see if we have any. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands on that portion, so I think we can move on to, do we? Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Kamei. I didn't see your hand go up there. Go ahead.
Just a quick question on if there are sort of grants in question or anything like that, is it included in here or has it already been taken out? If there are grants that perhaps you had hoped to receive but are not going to receive at the national level, is it included in here or not? Or
Generally, the any grants that we have that are those are normally shown in the current fiscal year under the adopted budget or the modified budget. On a going forward basis, we normally don't project the grants unless we already know that they are going to be in hand and we are budgeting for it. So
okay.
Those probably are not going to be showing up in the proposed column that you saw on the slide earlier.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's all I wanted to know.
But then there is a lot of that funding will probably roll over at the end of the fiscal year to the extent that that grant is not done yet and that work needs to continue over. That'll be rebudgeted as part of our
future
adopted budget process.
Yeah, that's in the future though, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Appreciate that. I'm not seeing any other hands. Why don't we continue on with the next portion of this section? Thank you all.
So Mayor, I guess on this point, it would be appropriate to ask if there's any questions on the appointee budgets themselves, and then we can go into the prioritizing our work section.
Okay, so council colleagues, this would be an opportunity to ask any direct questions to our 5 council appointees. Obviously, most of what we've been discussing within the city service areas are largely under the leadership of our city manager and her deputies and department heads. We also, of course, have our city attorney, city clerk, city auditor, and independent police auditor, the 5 roles that are essentially nominated by the mayor and appointed by a majority vote of the council. So this would be our 5 appointees. Do we have any questions? Let me go to Councilmember Cohen.
I just have one question for the city attorney. Given all of the legal issues we're facing and with the federal government and everything, obviously I see your budget's not asking for additional staffing or additional funding, but what is your feeling about the ability of the position of your office to be able to handle what I think will likely be an increased workload in the coming year?
Thus far, thank you for the question, council member. Thus far, we've been joining teams of litigants, and we've had the good fortune with some of the suits that we're involved in to have actually nonprofits kind of leading the charge, as well as much larger offices. So we participate, we pull together San Jose's piece of things, but so far we have not been asked to do any of the heavy work around developing pleadings and things like that. In discussions with council, we have had thoughts about whether or not it makes sense in some cases to try to do amicus briefing or those kinds of things. That's probably something we're not going to be able to do very readily unless we don't have the kind of trial schedule we've had over the last year or last 18 months. But we're hanging in and we're getting it done so far.
Okay, any other questions for our 5 council appointees? Not seeing any? Okay, let's continue on. Jennifer?
Yes, so I think we're going to tee up the manager's budget addendum number 3 that was distributed last week, and it's called balancing the budget and prioritizing our work, which I believe Sarah Zarate, you're going to lead us off on that. Thank you very much. She's the director of our Administration, Policy, and Intergovernmental Relations Office in the City Manager's Office.
Thank you very much. As a PowerPoint is brought up, I'll start speaking. Good afternoon, Mayor, council members, and members of the public. My name is Sarah Zarate, Director of the City Manager's Office of Administration, Policy, and Intergovernmental Relations. As you are all aware, the approved Mayor's March budget message for fiscal year 2025-2026 directed the City Manager to identify current work efforts or previous City Council direction that should be dropped or deferred to open leadership and staff capacity to drive on the work efforts that could make significant progress on City Council focus areas. This direction prompted us to conduct a comprehensive citywide effort to analyze 270 existing referrals comprised of direction through March of this year to understand their current disposition, whether they were complete, in progress, or not started. Of the 270 existing referrals, 143 were completed as of April 15th, and over 40 more were completed from this year's March budget message. For all items that were in progress or not started, which totaled 127, they were analyzed together with the remaining new referrals from the March budget message. Importantly, to ensure the analysis and recommendations for PBCE were comprehensive, an additional level of analysis was conducted for that department that included policy items in the PBCE citywide policy work plan. MBA number 3 that was published on Friday provides the complete analysis and categorical listings of all of the referrals. The process followed reviewed all the remaining referrals to categorize them as items that, 1, could be combined because they had similar intended outcomes, 2, should continue on the council referral list because they were anticipated to be completed at the end of this fiscal year, or were far enough along that they would be complete in the following fiscal year, were of high community value, or their continuance did not unlock resources for other urgent work. 3, they should be referred to the capital improvement program as one-time funded capital projects. 4, they should be deferred for at least 1 year, pausing staff activity. 5, they should be dropped, removed from tracking, and stopping all staff activity on the item. Or 6, they should be referred to the City Council focus areas to be analyzed and prioritized holistically based on activity that would significantly impact outcome and performance measures. In summary, 131 referrals were recommended to be combined, continue, or go to the capital improvement program. 19 were recommended to drop or defer from the department, with an additional 5 drops from the focus area, and 4 defers and 1 drop were recommended for the PBCE policy work plan. Lastly, with the Mayor's March budget message directing additional City Council focus area reports to free up bandwidth for leadership and staff to focus on high impact efforts, a recommendation was made to reduce the City Council committee meeting schedule with alternative on and off months. And that concludes my section.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Appreciate your efforts to consolidate our work plans and help us to really focus and execute. So everybody sees the chart there. Let me turn to colleagues. Colleagues, do we have questions on the consolidated work plan or any of the changes the administration's proposing? Councilmember Kamei.
I just wanted to identify item 151, which was through PRNS, was designated as complete, and it actually was not. And I mentioned it to Director Ciccarelli that it had not been completed because I ended up having one of my own staff persons not be there, and so I wanted to know you know, what is the process to be able to have it continue on into the next year, since that was sort of, from my office, it wasn't anything that that PRNS staff did, but from my office, it was not promoted appropriately and completed, you know, within this time frame.
Thank you, Councilmember John Cicerelli, Director of Parks, Recreation, Neighborhood Services. So I don't want you to think that this program or project is going away because we're saying it's complete. The complete part is our obligation, our tasks were to purchase the supplies, get them stationed, get them ready. So everything is ready to go. And once you've identified the participants, we'll just install it and we're done. But we're basically staged, done. There's no more money for us to spend. So we're saying, well, that's basically complete. It's really just a matter of standing up the program once you've got the volunteers.
So the pet stations were purchased, but I don't think that the bags were.
Yep, we have bags too. Yep, a whole
Oh,
bunch.
okay. I guess I was not aware of that. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Condellis.
Thank you. Just a quick question for staff is, with regards to the city council committee schedule improvements, I mean, what's the trade-off here? I mean, the council committees provide a vital role of oversight in certain key programs, whether it's animal services or other. And so I'm just curious as what the potential negative ramifications of this decision, given the various service levels and service lines that we have. I think it's over 163 in our city.
Yeah, thank you, council member. I think it does a few things. First, it forces us to prioritize what conversations we're going to have with you at council committee, whether it be the scorecard or other policies. You know, in the years that we've been here, there's so many referrals or just norms like, oh, this report always goes to PISFIS, that I think it's good for us to kind of reset and take a look at what really needs to come forward and what needs your attention. So that's how we're going to approach that work. The second thing is we did talk about this work and needing to execute on the various council priorities that are set. It is really that leadership capacity of staff, which committees take an awful lot of time of. The deputy directors and on above, those reports that come to you, just the grind on a month-to-month basis, it takes a lot of staff work to produce those. And then thirdly, it's your own bandwidth. As we have, obviously talked about today, the importance of cross-boundary collaboration and all of the other external boards that you sit on, whether it be VTA, Caltrain, or any other. That's the type of conversations that you all have asked us for more time, more strategic time to think through. And so this approach gets at a lot of that. And that's how we've tried to approach it.
And I'll add, so given the direction to try to, again, prioritize the work and create bandwidth this year, we're recommending this just right now for 25-26, and we'll assess to see if there was major misses of things that really should have been there, and then we'll have a conversation with you next budget season if it didn't go well. There may be some more information memos that come your way that don't go through the actual committees. But we thought we were reducing from 10 to 6. Taking 4 off would make a significant bandwidth gain for staff.
Right. No, and I don't necessarily disagree with the notion that we got to be more efficient with staff's time for reports, less reporting, and more actionable things that you guys can do. I understand that, but my fear is, for example, one of the things that I hear constantly from residents is on the work around recreation services or work at Lake Cunningham or the trail or the rangers at our different community facing facilities. So those are the things we hear regularly, whether it's NSC or other. And so that's why I just want to make sure that we're not losing an opportunity to be able to shape direction and or direct feedback as a committee to the administration at the cost of the scorecards, if you will. Fair enough? Thank you.
Yeah, understood. And I think as we kind of go through this with the chairs of the committee and the committee members this first year, those are things that we'll iron out. But we certainly don't want to get away of our normal service delivery and executing around that. This is not the intention to get away from any of that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councilmember. Let's go to Vice Mayor Foley.
Thank you. I appreciate moving from monthly committee meetings to quarterly committee meetings or every other month, depending on what's happening. It's actually, as the chair of CED, that's really an efficiency opportunity for us. There are a lot of reports we hear in CED that may be housing related, and 1 month we may hear one housing report, but then 6 months later we're hearing every other housing report. So if we can consolidate those, it makes it more efficient for staff and it makes it more efficient for us too, and we're not questioning, okay, this report's confusing because didn't we just have this? And I've been on this committee a long time, but I'm still confused about what some of the reports are that we get in relation to other reports. Some things we have to get quarterly. The other thing I would say, particularly with CED, I can't speak to the other committees necessarily, is that when we have a quarterly report on a particular item, there's not a lot that has changed. When we're talking about housing starts, there isn't a big difference between 3 months and 6 months, but a year, that's a number that is really helpful and with good data points. So I really like the efficiency of going to fewer committee meetings. It does mean that the committees may run longer, each meeting may, but it also means we're having less. So, you know, the committee members who are here right now, you may plan at CED to go till 4:30, but we're only going to have 4 or 5 meetings or 6 meetings, whatever it is, throughout the year. So I think it's really a good use of time, really a good use, particularly staff's time, and makes us more efficient as an organization. So I look forward to seeing how it works. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Great, agreed. And it's just a good reminder that we all in our day-to-day outside of these public meetings have hopefully take advantage of the extensive opportunities we have to request briefings and go deep with department heads and really get up to speed on everything and use those meetings for really actionable motions and things. So appreciate the Vice Mayor's comments. And I don't see any other hands on this section. Any other questions about consolidation of work plan or for our 5 appointees? Okay. So we're on to pay for performance. I'll start on that with some opening remarks. So I'm really proud today to present a proposal that represents a major step forward in enhancing accountability, transparency, and public trust in our work as elected officials. The pay for performance ordinance that Vice Mayor Foley and I are recommending, you may have seen our memo released last week, reflects a fundamental principle that leadership must lead by example. This memo will be heard this Wednesday at the Rules Committee, and it's a little bit of a modification from the March budget message that we collectively moved forward. For years now, we have asked our city senior staff, department directors, and their bosses, including our city manager, to align their compensation with measurable outcomes tied to community impact. And now with this proposal, we would be taking that same principle and applying it to ourselves by tying a portion of our salaries, our base salary, 5%, to the achievement of publicly adopted performance measures. We're making a bold statement. We should be held to the same standards we expect of others in city leadership and positions of influence. In the original language in the March budget message, we directed the city manager and city attorney to bring forward a recommendation for a 2026 city charter amendment that would have done this. As we had more conversations about implementation, got some great feedback from members of my Brown Act, including Vice Mayor Foley and Councilmember Cohen, who I know very much wanted to see if there was a path here that would avoid a ballot measure. Our city attorney and city manager identified an alternative method for achieving a similar result of tying a portion of our pay to performance and increasing that feedback loop, that accountability. So instead of using a city charter amendment, which obviously takes more time and costs more money, we're proposing that the council could instead use the existing charter language, section 407D, to bring forward an ordinance that does not require us to go to the voters to increase our salaries and establish annual raises for that feedback loop, but instead aligns the creation and enshrining of performance targets around the budget process and what would likely be, as we were discussing with our city manager earlier today, an end-of-year readout on performance from the prior fiscal year that would come in the fall, bringing forward a report each fall after the end of the fiscal year to grade our performance within those focus areas on the performance level metrics, not the outcomes. We all know when it comes to outcomes of reducing crime or ending homelessness, there are many confounding variables, but at that second level of program performance, we should be able to set goals that are clear, measurable, and where we can actually score how we do collectively across this organization, and then would have a public meeting in the fall to review those scores and accept the report. Instead of needing to do a charter amendment to direct the Salary Setting Commission to meet every year and then having to figure out how to actually create raises, the creative solution here would be to instead take 5% of our base salary and withhold it at the beginning of the year and then pay it back on a prorated based relative to the performance against goals. So very unlikely we would ever hit 0% of goals or we're doing something really wrong. In fact, we should, I think, always be above 50%, but of course we want to push ourselves, which is why we do this in our public meetings and why we signed up for these jobs, is to move the needle in our focus areas. So the idea, as has been mentioned, is really to increase accountability by setting our focus area priorities, our outcome goals, making clear what our key performance measures are, using the budget process to align funding and resources for aligned programs and policies that will help us achieve those outcomes, measure, and then have a feedback loop. So this initiative does a few things. It builds on the work we've been doing around our city focus area scorecards and dashboards, tools we've already developed to evaluate our effectiveness and focus our work in delivering better outcomes for the community. It brings our mayor and city council compensation practices in line with the city's management pay for performance program that is already in place for our senior staff, including the city manager, deputy managers, and department heads. It aligns the timing to be at the end of the fiscal year as we actually review our appointees and look to their goals and work plans for the coming year and make sure that what we have just directed in the budget and resourced in the budget is aligned from top to bottom. And with this solution, avoids the estimated $1 million cost of needing to go to the ballot for a charter amendment. So I think that more or less summarizes what's in the memo. Everyone can, of course, read it. I'm very hopeful that San Jose will be the city, as the capital of Silicon Valley, that leads the way in demonstrating what public sector focus, transparency, clear goal setting, performance management, accountability really looks like. I think we have a unique opportunity to do that. I've gotten a lot of interest from other cities, from the Bloomberg Foundation and others who are really watching what we're doing and very interested in the idea of greater transparency, greater feedback loops. And I think this is a great step in the right direction, building on all the work that we have done. So let me turn to colleagues, I'll turn to Jennifer first.
Yeah, just if the council does decide to do this, a couple of requests that I would like to ask is that I think with the memo, it's asking for the administration to come back with the performance measures this June. I respectfully request that we bring it back in September, given the short time frame and the fact that we've added another focus area, just to make sure that we get those performance measures right and we've thought about them appropriately, and also would like to bring back a rubric, for a recommended rubric of how you would measure to determine, what percent of that, how when you actually meet or not meet the performance measures along with all of the appointees and all the senior staff, what does, I'd like to bring back a proposed rubric to measure that, to determine, is it 80% if we meet 80% of that, does that deserve the 5%, or is it 90? Is it something else? I would want to do a little bit of research and make sure we're doing best practices in that regard. So those would be my two asks, if the council, again, approves this to go forward with the Rules Committee and what have you, and when we brought this back in June.
Thanks for that addition, and I agree. I do think it's important for the council to be discussing goals and performance measures as we do throughout the budget study sessions, throughout this process. I think the council should retain the right, of course, through the June message to indicate our goals and performance measures, but I do think it's appropriate to have a final approval in the fall when we actually have actual performance from the prior year. I think having an ability to close out the fiscal year and assess our performance, make sure we have had a couple of months to identify any learnings, and then do that approval in the fall, hopefully, but they should not be new. I think we'll be iterative. I suspect many of our focus areas and goals and measures will actually carry over year to year. It's not like we're going to end homelessness, as we just discussed, in one fiscal year, or stop having public safety be a top priority. I think we will see these focuses and performance measures often persist across years. Okay, so let's turn to colleagues for questions, and we'll start with Councilmember Condellis.
No, thank you, Mayor. I think, first of all, last year, or maybe 2 years ago, when we asked the administration and Jennifer to put together a rubric to which we would grade and or measure your performance and or any incentive pay or bonus pay, and you came back and you did that within the time frame, and our process is always changing as well, and see how we can improve the metrics that we set for our administration, our executive team. In theory, I think absolutely we should be tying our performance or our pay to performance to a certain extent. But I do have a question, and part of the direction is to tie it to predetermined objective performance metrics. But how do we tie that specific to our districts? I'm not elected on a citywide basis, and the scorecards are based on a citywide basis. I'm elected by people in Council District 8 to be able to advocate on interests that are theirs. And so my question is how do we tie individual districts, or Councilmember Casey in Elmadon, for example, or the fairgrounds issue in Councilmember Dwan's district. There's the Singleton site. There's so many individualized areas and priorities that our residents have, or they expect from us, that feels like we're putting their priorities behind citywide priorities, and that to me is something that concerns me, Mayor. So I'm interested to hear your comment on that.
I think it's an interesting question. I mean, I think we always juggle the dual responsibility to represent a group of constituents who, for at least 10 out of the 11 of us, are within a given geography, a district, to your point. And certainly there's a lot that goes into their assessment of our performance, including constituent services and presence in the community and individual votes that are taken. So there are a lot of data points, certainly. But at the end of the day, as contemplated in the charter, the City Council is the governing body that collectively has to create policies and budget allocations for the city as a whole. And so we don't actually govern on a per district basis. We govern on citywide budget and policies that then impact all of our districts. And so I think there's always a little bit of a tension there and a discussion. I think it's an interesting one to grapple with. It's not to say that we couldn't think about if the council as a whole felt that it was a top priority, because again, this is really meant to be that tip of the iceberg, just the greatest priorities, not most of our day-to-day services, but our change initiatives, essentially, where we feel that we need to move the needle. There could be some notion of a distributional requirement or a geographic spread, but really I've thought about these as council level, city level focus areas and priorities with citywide programs and policies, which is kind of our primary responsibility as a body.
Yeah, and that's fair, and I appreciate the administration's request for a little bit more time in figuring out the rubric and or the what those objective measures would be and look like, because that's also important. And obviously this is a rules memorandum that's coming before us for those who sit on that committee. But in any case, I look forward to discussing that and seeing how we can talk to some of the concerns that I know I've heard.
Sounds good. Yeah, appreciate it. And I do just want to clarify again on the administration bringing any proposals to adjust the metrics that would largely come out of our budget process, and the baseline is the current focus areas and scorecards and dashboards. So that is the baseline today. Adjustments that are recommended would come out of our budget process and deliberation and any other insights the administration might have. But ultimately, the goal setting needs to rest with the council. I think it's our responsibility to set goals and make clear how we measure success on behalf of the city, on behalf of our residents. Sorry, Councilor, did you have any more, or were you were good? Okay, let's go to Councilmember Cohen.
Thank you. As you know, I have some deep concerns about tying public elected officials' salary to performance metrics, especially when those performance metrics are created and evaluated by the council themselves. So, I know there's a lot of talk about being like the private sector. In the private sector, when we set goals for individuals. Appointees in our city are individuals who are career employees. They should very well be evaluated for their goals and held accountable for their performance. Just like in the private sector, where superiors determine the success of meeting goals, we do the same for our appointees here in the city. This proposal is asking us to make that decision about ourselves. I see that as a very different behavior than what occurs in the private sector and typical pay-for-performance programs. Elected officials are ultimately held accountable by the public. We are elected, we are re-elected. As Councilmember Candelas pointed out, the motivations of each district are unique and different. It is necessary for us, while we focus on the overall good of the city, to also focus on the individual needs of our district. When I focus on North San Jose and the lack of parks there, that's not something that will ever show up on a citywide metric. That will show up as a success in any kind of citywide measure. Also, we're all on different cycles, right? We're all in different parts of our careers here on council. We have an 8-year limited term. Somebody like Councilmember Campos or Councilmember Casey gets sworn in January and could be told in July, we didn't meet our metrics, therefore your salary won't be increased this year by the cost of living that is expected as part of the job that you got elected to serve in. So I just want to ask the mayor, what is the behavior of the council that you're trying to incentivize? It's still not clear to me. We set goals, I think, usually unanimously. Sometimes there's some dissent about what those goals are. We set the budget, and we, in my experience, have unanimously approved budgets. There's always debate about the best way to achieve the goals that we set, and that's healthy in a democracy. I guess I'm not sure of an example of what kind of vote we would be incentivizing on the council that requires this kind of sort of hammer to make us do that. So I don't know if you can answer that question.
Yeah, happy to. And so first I just want to clarify, CPI would not be touched by this. CPI would still be set and approved by the Salary Setting Commission every year, as is currently the case, and would still be based on total compensation, 100% of the base salary. It wouldn't touch cost of living adjustment. This would be a 5% of our base salaries, a symbolically meaningful amount, not a huge amount. One could argue it should be a much larger portion of our compensation, but the reality is, relative to the amount of responsibility we have and the pay, I think many of us could get in the private sector, it's not like we're paid huge sums. So the idea is to have some skin in the game, to hold ourselves to the same standard as our council appointees and their deputies and senior staff, and the recent council direction over the last couple of years to strengthen that alignment for our appointees and for their senior staff. In terms of what we're optimizing for, and in the private sector, I've seen a blend of both: collective goals set by a board that have compensation impacts for entire teams, because we do work as a team. That's very common. Also, individual goals and individual compensation. Obviously, on an individual basis, to your point, our presence, our communication, our individual votes, our constituent services are all factors that go into something like re-election. What I'm hoping to incentivize for this body, and I think the real strength of this and something that I see as a gap in our efforts, not just here, but I think across our public sector, is for us collectively to be strongly incentivized each year to be extremely explicit about what our top priorities are and having to rank those and come to a collective consensus to the best of our ability, knowing that we do not all agree on that, but we collectively as a body have to prioritize and make trade-offs. A direct articulation of what the outcome goals are that we're optimizing for. Is it ending unsheltered homelessness, or within the homelessness focus area that we've agreed to, or is it something else? Is it increasing affordable housing supply, or is it ending income inequality, or promoting racial justice, or some other way of measuring success? Within that, being very explicit about our hypotheses, and this is where the debate comes in, and the thing I like about it being measurable and us having a clear feedback loop and some skin in the game is that we start to move away from the world of rhetoric and partisanship and things that sound good to having to make our hypotheses explicit and show our math and demonstrate if we all agree our top focus is homelessness, if we agree the outcome that is most important is reducing the number of people on our streets, then the discussion we have and the programs and policies we resource through the budget process and the feedback loop that we should have some skin in the game related to should really be one where we have to each justify and show some math around an expected impact. What is it that we think will happen if we pursue certain policies and programs? A year from now, where will we be in a measurable way? I think it's very healthy for us to have to coalesce around a set of hypotheses that are explicit, that are data-driven, where when we vote, we are putting out there in a way that matters with skin in the game, this is how much progress we think we're going to make and why. Not just because it sounds good or because it's popular, but because I have some data to back up that what I'm trying to do here, what I'm proposing and asking my colleagues to support, this could be coming from any one of the 11 of us.
Thank you. Anyway,
will get us there.
Use my time.
But does that make sense? It's about having a feedback loop that is data-driven and having some skin in the game.
Yeah. Look, first of all, I can't judge what's a significant amount of money to any of my colleagues. I mean, we're talking 5% of our salary can be significant for some of us, so I will just point that out.
Presumably, we'd be motivated to retain
I will also say that, again, yes, the top motivation of our public ends up being the things that we are failing at or having trouble at. Homelessness tends to be that right now, but if we were to cut library services in order to spend more on solving homelessness, we would hear from our community that that wasn't a good outcome and that wouldn't be one of our primary measures. What I'm worried about is that this plan gives council perverse incentives. When it comes at the end of the year and we've got to make a decision about whether we're going to achieve our goals or lose some salary, and we have to choose whether to cut library hours, park resources, or the animal care center, or in order to put more money into the thing that we will be compensated for, there is a perverse incentive to make the wrong decision. There's also a perverse incentive. The research shows, and this is why there's a lot of political science research about this kind of work, that it incentivizes councils to make, or elected bodies to set less aggressive goals for themselves to make sure that they will achieve those goals. It also incentivizes the council to make short-term decisions for the next year in order to get their salary, rather than focus on the long-term health of the community. And, you know, those are all trade-offs debates that we have every year as a council. But I don't believe that this properly incentivizes us to do what's best for the long-term health of our city. You know, one example that's always given is, well, look, the state did it. The state said if you don't vote for the budget by this date, you end up not getting paid until the budget is passed. Well, first of all, it's not a cut in salary. It's a loss of salary for a period of time. But more importantly, what we've seen is they always meet that date, but they don't necessarily pass the right budget. They spend a month cleaning up the budget. They put in place a placeholder so that they can get their pay, because the incentive is we have to pass it by this date, and then they spend the next month improving the budget and actually finalizing the budget. It hasn't actually moved the needle on improving the outcome. So That's my first concern. I want to ask Nora now about the base salary question and how this works. The implication for the mayor is this doesn't affect CPI, although my belief is that there's a base salary that the charter sets. So how does this move forward? And I understand that this would be a cut, but is it an automatic reset that then brings that cut back? How does all that work in this process? This is way more complicated than a simple cut for a short period of time, right?
Yes, and somebody in payroll is going to have to be better at math than I am. But under the charter, the council can reduce its pay. The charter salary setting committee every 5 years sets a base pay, and council has a right to a CPI increase of up to 5% each year, and that happens pretty much automatically. So I think what this proposal is is a reduction in the base pay of up to 5%, but the CPI will be calculated each year on the full base pay that was determined by the Salary Setting Commission.
And that cut becomes a permanent cut because we don't have the mechanism to reinstate?
No, that's not my understanding. I think each year.
Each year, so at the end of that fiscal year, the salary resets back to the old base plus the CPIs that incurred.
Yeah. Yep.
And then there can be a cut made again on the new base level.
It's more of a withholding for up to 12 months.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, I just want to make sure that it's understood that this process, how this process would work.
It's not compounding, maybe, to your question. It doesn't compound year over year.
Right. Needs to be further enumerated, I suppose, in whatever's comes forward if it does move forward. Look, I believe it's very important for us to set goals and metrics, some local for our own purposes in our district, as Councilmember Candelas pointed out, and some citywide. It's important for us to do that evaluation at the end of the year and publicize those results and say, here are the goals we set and here's whether we met them or not. It even may be important for us to publicly shame ourselves if we don't achieve those goals and say, look, we didn't achieve this and I am just not sure that this is the proper incentive to get us to make better decisions as a council. Again, there are perverse incentives, and I believe it's bad policy to have a body set their own goals, decide whether they've achieved them in order to set their own salaries. To me, the reason we moved this, the city voted 7 years ago, the public, to remove that power from the council was in order to make sure that the council isn't either perversely incentivized or making this job more difficult for people who are thinking about running for office, making sure that we have a good, diverse representation of the community sitting up here on the dais. So those are all my concerns. Obviously, we'll have more chance to keep discussing this going forward, but I wanted to make sure I raised them today.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councilman. I appreciate it. Look, I think your point is taken that the design really matters. If we know anything about incentives related to compensation, how you design it, unintended consequences are hugely important. I would argue we are a long way from having the perverse incentive that we're over-optimizing for hitting goals. I think you could look at our budget book and years of not hitting goals to be clear that we've felt very little pressure to actually prioritize and force ourselves to hit the big goals. I would love to be in a situation where we feel that we have over-optimized and over-delivered on our community's top goals, but certainly the design of it's important. I think City Manager McGuire made a good point that it doesn't necessarily need to be a literal 100% to 100%. As you all probably know, when Google does OKRs, the sweet spot is set aggressive goals, and if you're consistently hitting 80% of your goals across the board, that's considered success. That is the threshold. Different entities, public and private and nonprofit, do this differently. But I'm glad we're having the conversation. It's great. I love it. Let's go to Councilmember Campos.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, as I've heard from my colleagues, and this definitely rings true, we are here for our constituents, and we're here for the entire city as well. We as a council are here to legislate together, and I'm curious what it is that we are trying to achieve through this pay for performance policy that we cannot achieve now. Mayor, what exactly will this make us do that we cannot do now? Could you please be specific? with the actions that this policy is going to help us take to meet our city goals?
Sure. Yeah, I ran for mayor on the premise that we were not sufficiently focused and that we had too many goals, too many different measures, and that actually, if anything, our incentive as a body, incentives for us individually, was largely to stay kind of in our own lane with our own opinions, our own base of support, and not come together and make tough trade-offs to set aggressive goals and implement policies and programs that would measurably achieve the outcomes we need. And we started by taking, in our very first, at least my first few months in this role, transitional committees, mayoral transition committees, that helped us consolidate with leadership from many of my colleagues here, a sprawling set of priorities down to some focus areas for the first time in at least a long time. I hear you. This is about, just to finish the answer to your question, putting together focus areas, dashboards, actually being explicit about how we measure success, and then demonstrating to our community to build public trust that we are not separate from, better than, or somehow above the city manager and her deputies and department heads in being accountable and having some skin in the game when it comes to setting and achieving very aggressive goals. I think it's probably the clearest way we can send that message.
Yeah, and I completely agree with what I've heard about the concerns with this policy from my colleagues, whether it's related to how do we ensure success for our districts against citywide goals. How do we ensure that our diverse perspectives and values are, able to flow in this conversation that we have as a council, because that's what we're here to do. Mayor, you just acknowledged that we have diverse perspectives, that we have diverse values, and my concern with this policy is that it doesn't allow for that difference of opinion, right? I am a woman of color who is representing a diverse district with diverse needs. My values are rooted in equity, honesty, respect, and compassion. I'm sure we all share these values, and I was elected for holding these values. And a policy like this will put me in a position where I'm having to second guess my values against the values that we are trying to drive as a city. It's going to put me in a position where I'm second guessing my own work. And as a woman, it's already hard enough to come into this space and experience the challenges of not being seen as an elected person, because people aren't used to seeing a young woman of color being elected to lead on the city council. And so it's challenging to hear a policy like this that is moving us in a direction that I don't think incentivizes more diversity on our council, more young people wanting to run for office, more women wanting to run for office, because we all know that when women are applying for a job, they will see that they only meet 60% of the qualifications and will choose not to apply. A man will look at that same job opportunity, only have 60% of the qualifications, and say, I am going to go for that opportunity. So I just want to caution what this policy is saying to our community, especially given that there is only 3 women on this dais. And it's important that we are electing, policy making that is going to embrace the diversity of our perspectives, of our values and opinions as leaders in our community. Because that's what we are, right? We are elected leaders in our community. We are not a board of directors. Government is a public agency that does not function like a corporation. Our goals are not to maximize profits or efficiency. We are here elected to maximize impact to our communities. And is it fair to say that some values like responsibility, accountability, or sustainability are better or more important than others? I don't think that that is a fair decision for us to have to make with this policy, because as a city, we have ethics policies that drive our work as a council. And as it was said earlier, the voters are the ultimate deciders. So if we are not doing a job as a council, the voters will let us know by electing to not vote us back into the leadership position that they entrusted us with. And so it is healthy to have debates and work through our issues together. It is healthy to have differences of opinions. And I hesitate with a pay-for-performance policy that oversimplifies the need to all agree, all be on the same page, because we can get to a place of compromise when we are given the opportunity to discuss openly, freely, without reservation, without fear of retribution for having our opinions and stating our values. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilmember. I very much agree that we are here here for impact, and I, if anything, to your final point there, very much agree that, and in fact, I hope having a process, a framework for setting goals, making explicit our hypotheses for impact, having to align around how we measure success will actually enhance the quality of our discussions and our debates and allow us to articulate our differences of opinion in a way that makes us better. In fact, one of my great frustrations first joining the council was I didn't feel there was enough robust debate about how we're going to achieve impact and exactly what we think we're doing that will actually make things better for our constituents. I do, though, have to push back on the notion that somehow representing a district is in conflict with the idea that we should be setting goals, measuring them, and be accountable for them. This entire structure here is that we are a collective decision-making body, and we each come with our own perspective, our own experiences. There is great diversity on this council, and the more the merrier. But at the end of the day, we don't pass district-specific budgets. We don't pass district-specific policies. We are charged with leading the city of San Jose and giving direction with one voice, even if 5 of us strongly dissent. Ultimately, the decisions of this council need to be committed to and acted on. And if 6 or more council members give direction to staff, they need to be able to go out and deploy our precious taxpayer resources to deliver programs and policies in a consistent and fair way across the city in every district. In fact, the only modification on that I'm aware of has actually been the work we've done for quite a few years now to bring an equity lens to our work to make sure that if we are in any way differentiating our delivery of policies or programs, we do it very explicitly to try to increase impact in communities that are traditionally underserved. But we govern as a body, we vote as a body, and the will of this council is a consistent direction to city staff to consistently implement programs and policies city-wide. And so I don't know what about setting goals, measuring performance, and tying a little bit of our pay raise each year to have some skin in the game and have that feedback loop. I don't know what about that would cause someone to second guess their values or their ability to be the leaders they want to be. Finally, on this point about elections, research actually unfortunately shows again and again that we each individually get elected, and unfortunately, by and large, incumbency is the #1 predictor of re-election. How much money you raise, name recognition, interest group support. Reality is there's a lot of feedback loops in politics. All I'm trying to do is get us here to have a more rigorous debate and conversation about what are our goals, what are our hypotheses for achieving those goals, and tell our community, look, we have some skin in the game here financially, just as we've asked our city manager, all of our appointees, and all of our senior staff to have. I don't know why we think we are different than or better than our senior staff when it comes to performance-based pay. All right, let's turn to Councilmember Mulcahy. At some point here, we have had a lot of folks waiting. I do want to get to some public comment. We have a hard stop at 5. So let me go to Councilmember Mulcahy, and then we may need to pause on this until Wednesday.
All right, thanks, Mayor. I'll make it relatively brief. You know, when this was brought up in the March budget message, I was supportive of it, but probably not for the reasons most might think coming from the private sector, but it really is from my experience in the public sector work that I've done, and it goes back to the founding of Team San Jose, which is all about performance measures and goal setting, and put forward by this very body and regulated by this very body from the standpoint that, you know, the organization doesn't continue if it's not meeting its metrics. And that is a very diverse group, one that I'm not sure that everybody on this dais really has always necessarily appreciated. But it's a consortium of hotels, businesses, arts, and labor having to come together, and in many ways, you know, setting differences aside to sort of uniformly go after and perform for the good of our city. And so, you know, in my experience, you know, performance measures and goal setting is nothing new for this city. Sorry, Mayor, you didn't bring that to San Jose. We've been doing it since 2004 when Team San Jose was founded. You know, we've also done this in my prior role as the executive director of the Children's Musical Theater, you know, going through the grants process here in San Jose. It's a competitive process, and you've got to meet, you know, certain measurements, and you're judged each and every year by how you're utilizing city investments through the grant program. So, you know, to me, now that we're doing it with senior staff and our city manager and so forth, you know, it seems important that we join that as a council to set goals, as we do anyway, and have an opportunity to have, you know, pay at risk if we're not performing. And so I think based on those experiences and things that San Jose has already implemented, that this is a policy that we should continue to pursue, and I'll look forward to seeing it develop over time. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilmember. Appreciate those insights from your experience. And fair enough, not an original idea. I will acknowledge that. It actually works in a lot of different places. So we're gonna, we have a hard stop at 5. I know a number of colleagues need to leave for other commitments. We will continue with comments. We have Council Members Ortiz, Vice Mayor Foley, and then maybe back around to Councilor Cohen and others. We'll pick up on Wednesday, but I do want to take the last half hour to hear from members of the public. Tony, we will need to limit public comment to 1 minute per person, and we better jump in. By the way, those of you in the crowd, you all have been great. Thank you for your patience. We need to move efficiently. People have First Amendment rights. Please, no disrupting the meeting, no cheering or booing. Let's let Tony give people their 1 minute here at the mic.
Okay, I'm going to call your name. When you hear your name, please come on down. You do not have to speak in the order that you are called. I'm going to call about 6 names because I suspect some of the early people may have left, so I'll call a lot of names at the beginning. Go ahead first here. Line up in the behind. Go ahead. You don't have to sit in the front row. You can just line up. We're going to start with Tam Nguyen, followed by Lori Ketcher, Andrew Siegler, Brenda Bell Brown, Amelia Castellanos, and Mark Adams and Pancho Guevara. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Tony. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and councils. And I know some of you. I came today not as a former councilman, but a citizen trying to help a citizen. The only thing I try to relate to the time I was at the council, try to remember the only one thing, if you want to do, what would that be? I'm thinking of the seniors, the poor, the old people, especially the newcomers. They are the most vulnerable. They are most defenseless. They are the ones who need our help the most. I broke my heart when I heard the news that PRNS is going to cutting the $500,000, this older adult program where Vivo Foundation, where I help, is receiving $20,000 funding for ESL and case worker. Those are the only things that we can help them to change their life.
Thank you.
So I would.
Thank you. That's your time. Next speaker.
Good
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Amelia Castellanos, resident of District 10, and I am the Welcome Center manager at Sacred Heart Community Service here in San Jose. Since 1964, our organization has provided food, clothing, and essential support to our community. Every day, I have the privilege to welcome 600 to 800 of our community members, many of whom are unhoused and speak languages like Spanish, Vietnamese, Mandarin, and English. I am often the first person they talk to, treating them with dignity, compassion, and respect because that's what they deserve. That's why I'm here today to clearly say we do not support arresting, detaining, or forcibly relocating our unhoused neighbors, whether or not they accept shelter. This plan is inhumane and strips our community from their belongings and punishes them for their poverty. Now, instead of addressing the root causes of homelessness, our city is choosing to criminalize it. These are real people, not problems that need to be pushed out of sight. I urge you to reject this harmful plan and invest in real, compassionate solutions.
Thank you. Next speaker. I'd also like to call Aaron, it looks like Aaron Stanton and Francesca Paste. Go ahead.
My name is Drew Sagler. I live in District 3 and I'm a member of Surge Santa Clara County. In 2017, after a series of disasters coupled with physical and mental health issues, I lost my housing, ended up homeless, and it took 5 years to get back into housing. This so-called responsibility of the shelter policy would have set me back indefinitely. I'm against the criminalization of homelessness, and it is. You're using police, you're arresting people. That's criminalization. We must focus on prevention efforts in addition to building more affordable housing. Do not approve Mahan's plan to arrest unhoused people for supposed refusal of shelter. And if you want to focus on public safety, spend your resources funding trust for 24/7 instead, because trust is public safety. Care, not cuffs. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Poncho Guevara. I work at Sacred Heart Community Service, and I'm a resident of District 6. I wanted to come out here and just, thank you for at least bringing this dialogue forward about what is a massive crisis in our community, and also say this is a giant waste of time and resources to be able to look at how are we trying to solve a problem when we don't have the resources to actually connect people up with what they need. They need housing and they need services. And the fact that we're even spending the hours that we are talking about this is just seems like we're missing the point, because if you look at what's happening at a federal level, they're eviscerating the safety net. We're going to be pushing more families into homelessness, and being able to take resources that we could be putting into building more housing or preventing people from entering into homelessness in the first place. We're talking about what are we going to do to try to move people around, dump them off at the county, they're not going to get incarcerated, so what? So we feel better about ourselves. Not a solution.
Thank you. Next speaker. I'd also like to call Dinah Hayes, and go ahead, and UI Kai. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Adams. I'm also with Sacred Heart Community Service, and while I may not personally know the trauma of living life on the streets, I do know what it's like to be judged, to be targeted, to be excluded. My experiences as a young black man of being harassed by security on a prestigious college campus, to being pulled over by police despite doing nothing wrong, and forced to change my hairstyle to keep my job, spoke volumes to me about the truth of structural racism in our society. Indeed, there's a reason black people make up only 3% of San Jose's population and 20% of those living on the streets. To hear how the mayor is threatening to arrest these very same people, effectively targeting and excluding our black and brown unhoused neighbors for exercising a choice about their lives that our collective dignity demands, feels like the logical extension of the structural racism that is sadly all too familiar to me and to far too many of us in this country.
Thank you. Next speaker. Deb Kramer, Dilza Gonzalez, and Michelle Schroeder. Come on down.
I encourage the San Jose City Council and staff to continue to work on your issues presented by your constituents today, abiding by the golden rule every step of the way. Base your decisions on truth and fiduciary common sense. Truth, neither you nor your families and immediate friends would trade places with anyone relegated to a unhoused situation on any given day. Truth, the high cost of living in this area is not due to the doling out of taxpayer dollars to support poor people. No, it is due to the support of offshore business interests and corporate investment. Fiduciary common sense should have you investing in the people who live and work here instead of taking our hard-earned monies and throwing it at corporations who raised our beautiful orchard valleys for parking lots and tall steel and glass buildings that now sit empty.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good afternoon. My name is Erin Stanton, and I work at Sacred Heart. For the past 8 years, I've had the privilege of working with the homelessness prevention system, which has helped thousands of people remain housed. I believe that arresting unhoused people who refuse shelter is cruel, short-sighted, and does not solve the problem of homelessness in our community. I've seen firsthand the success of investing in prevention and permanent housing. Permanent affordable housing combined with supportive services works to end homelessness. But we haven't invested enough to scale the solution to match the problem. We need to invest more in solutions like permanent housing, not back away. The goal of getting people off the streets is compassionate, but criminalizing homelessness is the wrong way to do it. It's cruel and ineffective. When people are ticketed or arrested, they move down the road. They return to the streets after time in jail, and they lose trust in services. Criminalizing homelessness makes it harder to end homelessness. Housing and services are the
Thank you. Next speaker. Also like to call Georgia Basil, Gail Osmer, and Jason Sr. Go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Teresa Gonzalez. I live in San Jose, California for the past 25 years, and I'm part of Sacred Heart Community Service. I also have experienced homelessness twice in the last decades, and I refuse shelter for personal reasons. This is why I know Mayor Mayhem's plan is not a solution. It is a cruel and inhumane plan. It goes against our city welcome plan, which says San Jose is committed to being an inclusive community. I guess not for our unhoused people. Instead of building more housing, the mayor wants to arrest unhoused people who don't follow a code of conduct, even though there are enough beds for everyone, and pushing to spend more money on police while cutting funds from homelessness prevention and senior health programs. This is a disservice to our community. This plan adds trauma to an already vulnerable population, so I urge you to stand with the unhoused and support real, humane solutions that protect people, like permanent housing, not systems of oppression and punishment.
Thank you. That's your time. Next speaker. Marcelo Espirito and Emily Hendon, come on down. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Michelle Schroeder. I'm an attorney with Senior Adults Legal Assistance. SALA provides free legal services to San Jose older adults, targeting clients that are low income or at risk of abuse, homelessness, or loss of independence. SALA and 8 other agencies are currently funded by the Older Adults Health and Wellness Grants. We have joined together as the Save Our Seniors Coalition because we are concerned about elimination of $526,000 in health and wellness funding in the PRNS budget. Currently in San Jose, SALA serves 9 different senior centers: Alma, Camden, Cypress, John the 23rd, Eastside, Mayfair, Roosevelt, Southside, and Willow Glen. Without support from the Older Adults Health and Wellness Grant, we will have to scale back our services at sites in San Jose, including elimination of services altogether at 4 or more sites. Our partner agencies will have similar negative impacts. Please do not eliminate funding for the...
Thank you. That's your time. Next speaker. Patty McNeil and Catherine Hedges, come on down.
Good afternoon, Gail Osmer here. In over my 30 years of being an advocate for the unhoused, I have never seen something that's the worst program you have here, the Olive program. This is absolutely ridiculous. You are moving RVs from that neighborhood, this neighborhood, all over. You voted for this, but no plan. Nobody has been out to any of the Olive program abatements. The unhoused are out of their mind, stressed. You're taking their homes away and their belongings, and you don't care. Now you're going to increase it to 50 sites? I just don't understand what you're thinking. Look at the debacle that happened at 237. That wasn't Olive, but housing did not do one thing. The only person that did anything was David Cohen and Lamb. They tried to stop it. Housing didn't send anybody. And this is what happened.
Thank you. That's your time.
Good afternoon. Georgia Basile, Directing Attorney of Senior Adults Legal Assistance, resident of District 6, very proud resident, in fact. We provide free legal services, as you heard from Michelle, for seniors here in San Jose, and we have been receiving health and wellness funding since 2012. We address a range of critical matters that impact our clients' lives. We address income insecurity by helping them with legal problems related to their public benefits, Social Security and SSI. We address housing instability by helping seniors that are facing eviction, that need reasonable accommodations, or whose housing is in jeopardy. We address loss of independence by doing basic planning, such as powers of attorney, so family members can step in and help our clients make decisions when they can't. And we address elder abuse. We're attorneys, we're in court, getting restraining orders to prevent abusive parties living in our clients' homes by removing them. We can't charge fees for our services or accept fee-generating cases.
Thank you. Next speaker. Also Sandra K. Harrison and Sandra Mikkonen and Elva Wilson, come on down. Go ahead.
Hello, I'm Marcelo from District 10, Director of the Health Insurance Counseling and Advocacy Program at SourceWise. I request that the City Council not eliminate funding for the Older Adults Health and Wellness Program. HICAP has been providing free Medicare education and one-on-one counseling services to older adults since 1985. The program has a small team of 7 staff, but relies heavily on 33 state-certified volunteers to provide one-on-one counseling in 13 different languages across the county. Grant funds have allowed us to hire a bilingual Spanish-speaking counselor to fill the gap in services, since we've been unable to find a Spanish-speaking volunteer. This part-time bilingual HICAP counselor can serve Spanish-speaking population at Roosevelt, East Side, and Mayfair. The part-time bilingual HICAP counselor counsels about confusing Medicare and Medi-Cal options, helping those choose a plan based on their health access and prescription drug needs. Again, without her, we would have to stop that type.
Thank you. Next speaker.
I'm Patty McNeil from the McLaughlin Corridor Neighborhood Association in District 7. We strongly support the mayor's budget, including the proposed responsibility to shelter initiative. In the neighborhood surrounding Coyote Creek, we're finally seeing meaningful progress, momentum we urge you to maintain. As parents, we teach our children that accountability is essential to personal growth and social responsibility. The same principle applies here. We must compassionately support our unhoused neighbors, especially those battling addiction and mental illness, even when they resist that help. As the mayor has said, this is about compassion paired with accountability. Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good afternoon. I'm Catherine Hedges. I'm a downtown voter, a member of Showing Up for Racial Justice of Santa Clara County. And it just took me 7 years to get a Section 8 housing voucher so I can move out of Donner Loft. So I asked the council to reject the proposed task force to arrest people for refusal of shelter, loitering, trespass, or otherwise being unhoused in public. For every 5 people we house, 8 or 9 other people fall into homelessness when their rent increases or they have a personal financial emergency. What we need is cheaper housing and more eviction prevention, not a task force to arrest unhoused people to somehow force them into services that don't really exist. We cannot arrest our way out of a housing crisis. Care Court, which only applies to a very limited population, can't create housing that doesn't exist. There's 1,400 people on the waiting list for shelter beds. We are sweeping people have nowhere to go, like Gail was talking about.
Thank you. That's your time. Next speaker, I'd also like to call Tom Wilson, Robert McKinnon, Wes Malik, and Sean Panchel. Come on down. Go ahead.
Good afternoon.
My name is Elva Wilson. I came here from Mexico with my family, working the fields as a migrant worker, enduring the dangers of crop dusters dropping pesticides on us. As a woman and as a person of color, I've experienced poverty. I have experienced oppression. My heart sinks when I see a drug-addicted or mentally ill brown person living outdoors in squalor. A vote against responsibility to shelter is an oppressive act against a vulnerable people. This council has the power to stop this oppression. Help people who can't help themselves. Support the mayor's proposal. I have 5 seconds. I support pay for performance. Please support.
Thank you. Next speaker.
I am a witness. I have witnessed this pattern over and over. You have a thriving business, homeless park themselves in front of the business, paying customers stop going, the homeless remain. The business loses customers, revenue, employees, and is forced to close. The once thriving business is boarded up and covered in graffiti. This is a criminal. It is criminal to allow that to happen. I am a witness and have witnessed this pattern over and over. You have a beautiful green belt, a lovely park, a dedicated walking and biking trail enjoyed and respected by countless families. Homeless set up camp and colonize, destroy the health and beauty with toxic trash. Countless families avoid and then stop visiting the area and never bring visitors. These areas are literally being stolen from people who once enjoyed them. It is criminal to allow this to happen. I stand 100% behind Mayor Matt Mahan in his efforts to keep San.
Thank you. That's your time. Next speaker.
Hello, I'm Robert Mickden. I'm here to represent the public and the citizens, not special interest. My sister's son, who is mentally ill, drug addicted, and violent, has been in and out of jail for years for assaulting her. Each time he was released with no consequences and no mandatory treatment. His assaultive attacks on her grew more violent each time. 6 years ago, he murdered my sister. My sister and my family are the victims, not him. Many of the homeless are mentally ill, drug addicted, and violent. They are committing multiple crimes in our city. They are not the victims, we are. They need to be held accountable for their crimes. Homelessness is not a free pass to commit crimes. I worked as a Santa Clara County Correctional Deputy for 27 years. Many of the inmates are homeless, mentally ill, drug addicted, and violent. When they get released, they go back to living on the streets with no treatment. The city and the county need to place these criminals in lockdown treatment facilities.
Thank you. That's your time. Next speaker. I'd also like to call Hong Kao, Fu Yun, and Danny Garza.
Before we continue, everybody has a right to be heard. We're not going to get into shouting back and forth. The clerk will call names. People get a minute. I'd ask people to wrap up at 1 minute so we can hear from the next person. Thank you. Go ahead.
I'm here today not just frustrated. I'm disgusted by the total failure of this council to address the RV and encampment crisis destroying our city. Your inaction has emboldened these individuals to act above the law. Now we have slumlords renting out broken down RVs to homeless and illegal immigrants, setting up shop in industrial zones, turning once productive areas into lawless encampments. You clear one site, and a week later, it's back, 100 feet away. That's not policy, that's insanity. And by that definition, most of the city council is acting insane. You've turned a blind eye while our businesses and neighborhoods suffer daily. You talk about affordable housing, so do I, but I work for every opportunity I get. You, on the other hand, reward freeloaders and punish the people holding the city together. If you oppose Mayor Mahan's plans, let's line these RVs up outside your homes and see how fast you act then. You don't represent the majority anymore, you represent those gaming a broken system. Pass the mayor's plan or watch as the workers, families, and businesses that built this.
Thank you. Next speaker. I'm also going to call Sam Ho and Danny Costa. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, City Council. Thank you for the opportunity to support a sustainable step towards restoring our city's quality residential and business environments. Our neighborhoods, schools, shopping centers, and public spaces have shifted from being the envy of the world to places of chaos and fear. Let's work together to restore them to their best use. My name is Sean Panchal, and I'm the president of the Monterey Corridor Business Association, MCBA. We represent 1,500 businesses along Monterey Road, which extends from Capitol Expressway to Alma Avenue and is known as the Southern Gateway to San Jose. With over 100 years of hands-on experience in stewarding these economic lands, we are determined to confront the homelessness crisis plaguing the MCBA. The Responsibility to Shelter Initiative provides a clear and responsible strategic set of actions to tackle this urgent issue. We call on the City Council to take immediate action to implement this initiative.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hello. The squalor in encampments is an extreme health risk to all. Perhaps worse is the danger brought about by mental illness, drugs, weapons, crime, and violence. We must do better, yet many council members are content funding the nonprofits who have failed for decades to bring homeless people indoors. To perpetuate their funding, the nonprofits have stacked the podium today with shills spouting misinformation so they can continue riding the gravy train of government contracts. I support the mayor's responsibility to shelter proposal. No one should be living and dying on the streets in San Jose. While we're building needed shelter, we must act immediately to move the drug addicted and mentally ill into treatment. Too many people are refusing shelter and treatment even when offered private units with bathrooms, kitchens, and services. By continuing with the current failed policies, people suffer, but with new innovative solutions, we can save lives. I urge the council to support the mayor's proposal.
Okay, I'm going to call the three names that I kind of may not have been heard through over-talking. Hong Kao, Fu Yun, and Danny Garza. Go ahead, next speaker, come up to the microphone.
Good afternoon. I want to share the hard truth about my neighborhood and support mayor's proposal on the new shelter enforcement. I bought a townhouse last year near Center Road and Tully Road. I was too late to realize the homeless encampment issue after moving in. They smoke weed, drink, and do drugs in the public. And the broken glass litter on the ground, and my own dog was injured stepping on it. They put on their pants to urinate and defecate the public. They also go to our front yard to pick up fruits from our trees. And I've been reporting for months on 311 multiple times, but there's no improvement. But then I heard mayor's proposal to enforce the shelter and take action against those who refused it. And I have to come out to support it with my whole heart. Arresting after 18 months is too long, in my opinion, because we have to struggle and suffer from those stench of urine and waste every day. And it's easy for those who reject the proposal because they don't have them to live right outside your house. They have to take a shelter and stop lingering in our house or will be moved. So I endorse mayor's proposal and the new police unit to execute arresting. Our community deserves safety, cleanliness, and respect. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker. I'd also like to call Jaime Wolak, maybe Jamie, Ross Martinez, and Jim Huang. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Sam Ho, District 9 resident, and solving the homeless problem is a humanitarian issue, and it needs to be solved tonight, not next week, not next year, not next 5 years. And thank you for your attention to this urgency. Responsibility to shelters means that the city has the responsibility to provide shelter, and the homeless has the responsibility to be sheltered. And if they refuse to do so, like the one family that is right now, right at the back fence of one family that is they disabled people inside, and now they are afraid their house will be on fire because of the cooking. They cannot go to the backyard because the smelling of the marijuana is so strong, and the night they cannot sleep because of the yelling and screaming and the argument. We need to make sure they get shelter, and they have a responsibility to shelter. That's a humanitarian issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Honorable Mayor and Council Member, my name is Hong Kao. I'm Director of Viet Museum, RICC. I came here today to address our input toward the concern of some people about the enforcement of homelessness in San Jose. As you know, for the couple of years, we are working really hard to find the funding to solve this problem, even those that stay in the very short in budget. And we believe the solution is the best for the people because we are respect to the dignity of the people to provide the shelter and service for the needy people, and to reduce the public safety concern and the impact of the long term on the community quality of life. I totally agree that the people who repeatedly refuse the shelter offer should be liable and have to be fed enforcement.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good afternoon, everybody. Danny Costa with my fellow colleagues, SOS, as well as SOS over there too. We got the whole first row. I'm here to speak on behalf of Mayor Mahan's sheltering and the responsibility shelter. Okay, last time I spoke about the addictive nature of not being responsible. When I was homeless, you know what the first thing I do when I wake up? Anything I wanted. I wasn't responsible for anybody or anything. It's an addiction, it's a sickness, you're dealing with it, Mayor, and that needs to be dealt. And as SOS, that's what we do. We're an implementation team. We get to the heart of the issues, and I love your unit that you're gonna bring out to what? Engage and enforce. There's two elements that we learned from Valley Water on what we're doing, and that is you've got to also educate and motivate. And from a experience side, we educate and motivate with a missing element, I believe, and that's what we're here about. Thank you.
Thank you. That's your time. Tina Morrill, come on down.
In District 3, 249 working-class families at Orchard Park next to Coyote Creek have lived through the following summary of events in the past 12 months. Last week, a homeless man's pit bull chased after a young boy before his dad saved him. Last month, a neighbor was assaulted and taken to the ER in an ambulance. Last December, a homeless man set the main PG&E power pole on fire, left these 249 families without power. Copper wire theft left us without streetlights for 8 months. Copper pipe theft left 23 homes without HVAC. A car was set on fire, burned to the ground. Break-ins, trespass, death threats are all documented. My mom now lives in Santa Clara, where I actually send my packages because those are stolen daily in San Jose. All of this homeless encampment crime takes a lot of hard work. Let's finally stop San Jose's working families from being their victims. Please approve the necessary measures, prevent these issues at Orchard Park by properly reinforcing the city fence. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker. Microphone.
Hello. One thing we consistently asked, can I have a reset, please?
Yeah, go ahead.
One thing we consistently ask the city is to clean up this Coyote Creek that he was just talking about from the homeless encampments and strengthen the fence that separates the creek from the nearby community where I live, which includes a public park, picnic area, and playground. This creek is home to several homeless encampments with lots of debris and dogs that occasionally come off leash and roam our neighborhoods, one of which almost attacked a child. Many holes made along the fence give unhoused and others quick access to our streets. We experience a lot of trespassing on private property because of this. Some repairs to the fence were made by the city, but they're not strong enough. These holes are easily reopened. Just removing homeless people out of an area doesn't cut it if you don't give them a good place to go to and provide the care that they need. In fact, the creek was abated in 2022. Within months, they all came back and remain here today. One of our homeowners who lives right across a large opening in this fence fears for their safety daily. They feel unprotected from the activity, including prostitution, drug deals, and sometimes gunshots along the creek.
Thank you. That's your time. I'd also like to call Maria Blaze, Yuritsi Torres Mendoza, and Larry Whitaker. Come on down. Go ahead.
Hello, Council. I'm here to urge the Council to support the Mayor's responsibility to shelter proposal. My name is Ross Martinez, and I live in District 3 across the street from San Jose's new long-term supportive housing facility, the Path Villas on 4th. It's been very encouraging to see thousands of new supportive housing projects or units sprout up. However, based on my own experiences and those of neighbors living next to a facility, I want to warn you about growing concerns and frustrations. Unfortunately, since our facility is open, we're dealing with more RVs and encampments in the neighborhood. Councilmember Carl Salas and County Supervisor Betty Dong are now leading meetings to help us with these problems, and one of the problem-solving measures has been for the County Office of Supportive Housing to start coordinating and dispatching resources to engage these individuals on the street. Last month, 27 vehicles were engaged, but none accepted help. It's clear to me and many of my neighbors we're going to need more tools to bring people inside.
Next speaker. Also, Don Copin and Michael Morand, come on down.
Good afternoon. My name is Jim Huang, a resident of District 8 for over 24 years. I strongly support Mayor's responsibility to shelter initiative. I care deeply about our unhoused neighbors, and I'm also concerned about the public safety risks and the negative impact encampment have on businesses and community life. We have seen how encampments hurt San Francisco's economy and tourism. I stopped taking visitors to San Francisco, and my daughter moved out of San Francisco due to safety and health concerns. In our District 8, several encampments appeared along Capitol Expressway in mid-April. I was relieved to see the city clear them within 2 weeks. Now it's time to act, to support both our vulnerable neighbors and broader community.
Thank you. That's your time. I'm also going to call Yvette Papineau and Ali Victorine. Come on down.
Hello, my name is James Wolak. I live in the Vendome neighborhood in D3. In the last month, we've had 2 violent crimes in our neighborhood from the unhoused. They took an axe to a police officer, and most recently took a machete to a police officer in our neighborhood. We've had 1 dead body in our park, found in between the children's area and the benches. We have constant fires, including a fire in our neighborhood farm where our children go to camp. Our neighborhood is not a NIMBY neighborhood. We deeply care about the homeless, and we have great empathy for them. We have supported tiny homes. We have the Kelsey with support of housing. We have 2 halfway homes. We have a foster agency. And us as a neighborhood have had to fight to keep these because our neighbors wanted out. Despite all this, we still see the same unhoused people, unhoused neighbors, outside neighbors, 5 years later.
Thank you. That's your time. Next speaker.
Good afternoon. My name is Tina Morrill. I live in the Vendome neighborhood in District 3. While we wait for more permanent, affordable housing to be built, we have to approach housing for all in a manner that is fair for all, both the housed and the unhoused. There's no perfect solution. There are good solutions. And my concern is if people are turning away housing, they are on the streets. Not everyone has good behavior, as you have heard. Indeed, some are combative and destructive. And as a neighbor in the Vendome neighborhood, I have had multiple personal experiences in and around my home that make me frightened. I urge the council to support the mayor's proposal, finish building the shelter system, and make sure everyone, housed or unhoused, are held to the same basic standard. It's the right and fair thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Mr. Mayor, Madam Vice Mayor, and Council. My name is Larry Whitaker, and I've lived in Santa Clara County for 50 years. I'm here to support the Responsibility to Shelter initiative. We need to end the era of encampments and increase shelter capacity. I support a new police unit that will cite or arrest people who are camping illegally. I disagree with the term I see in the news stories that say, quote, arrest homeless people. I think the proper term should be cite or arrest anyone who is camping illegally. It is not a crime to be homeless. However, it is a crime to camp in certain areas. I urge you to support the initiative. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker. I'd also like to call Blanca Rosas, Suzanne, and Michael T.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Morand, and I'm with SOS Group 2. And what we try and focus, I mean, I know that this is a big problem, and how it's going to be solved, I don't know. I don't know if criminalization is the right answer. So what we do is we focus on things that can really help the homeless. We understand that a lot of people that don't want to get off the streets. There are a lot that do, and that's our focus, is to try and help them get off the streets. We've had some success. We collaborate with some independent living homes and SLEs to get people housed. So while we talk about building shelters, I think some focus could be put on that. Also, the outreach thing. As outreach people ourselves, we would like to be perhaps part of, or at least aware of, the outreach that the city provides.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good afternoon. I'm Dawn Coppin, CEO of the San Jose Public Library Foundation. On a slightly different topic, I want to thank you for making sure that all of the libraries maintain their open hours as a place in the community where all are welcome. On behalf of the 725,000 cardholders in the city, I am eager to see what the MBA looks like that was talked about earlier today, that would permanently remove late fees for everybody as a point of equity and access. However, I am disappointed to see that the funds for materials for the library's collection is less than it was last year. As you know, San Jose has one of the lowest per capita rates for library materials, even though the use is increasing and the demand for books is increasing and the prices are increasing. So I'm looking forward to a longer-term plan as part of your 2-year budget, and appreciate your support of the library.
Thank you. Next speaker, Elaine Meward, come on down. Gary Victorine, Consuelo Collard. Go ahead. Tri Wynn, Eugene Torres, and Sean. And that is all the cards. Go ahead.
My name is Yvette Papineau. I am an employee of SOS, but I have been homeless on and off part of my life. I am educated. I've always paid my tax-paying dollars. My brother is a veteran, and my parents are dead. There are some things that just don't work, and I've never been arrested. I don't want to be arrested because I have no place to go. I have fallen through the cracks several times. I've begged for housing, and it's not coming through. This is a problem that I need help with today, not in a year. I'm going to be a criminal in a year. I have goals and I have dreams. I've been working in the healthcare system for 20 years. I don't want to become a criminal and not be able to be a productive member of society. Not everyone is on drugs that are on the streets. Not everyone wants to live inside, but the longer that they're outside, the more that their mental stability changes, the way they think about things.
Thank you. Next speaker. Next speaker. Sorry, your time is up.
Hello, Council. My name is Allie Victorine. I'm president of the Seven Trees Neighborhood Association and the D7 Leadership Group. I support the mayor's budget and his responsibility to shelter initiative because I have seen firsthand the chaos, destruction, health, and safety issues caused by a few, not all, unhoused persons who are unable to make rational decisions for themselves. I do not believe this initiative will criminalize homelessness. If I did, I would not support it. I believe this will give our city a tool to help those who cannot help themselves. Our neighborhoods have been held hostage by multiple fires, 2 exploding RVs, open drug use, nudity, urination and defecation at our libraries and community centers, and aggressive behavior such as threats, rock throwing, and tree destruction. I do encourage the city to continue to create a wide variety of shelter options, including safe camping and parking, and permanent housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Blanca Rosas. Soy participante de varias organizaciones que ayudan a los homeless. También soy una de las personas que he sufrido de no tener housing. En el momento estoy en mi RV, pero yo no estoy de acuerdo con encerrar a las personas si no tienen un plan o un lugar donde llevarlos Las personas necesitan mucho un lugar, un tratamiento, porque cuando estamos en la calle, en la noche es muy diferente que en el día. Muchas personas que tienen hogar no lo entienden. No
I am a home,
entienden
a
eso.
treatment, because when we're on the street, at night it's very different than during the day. Many people who have homes don't understand it. They don't understand it because they haven't suffered through it. I would like you to go and see what it is really like to live on the streets. Why not? I have worked in security for 30 years. Right now I'm disabled, unpleasant. Unfortunately, for working really hard, 3 security jobs. Thank you so much.
Esteemed council members, I'm here today on behalf of the VEP Neighborhood Association and District 2 Leadership Council in support of Mayor Matt Mahan's Responsibility to Shelter initiative. It's a bold, compassionate, and necessary step toward ending the humanitarian crisis on our streets. For too long, we've watched as thousands of our neighbors suffer outdoors, with over 200 lives lost each year in Santa Clara County alone. Mayor Mann is acting decisively by expanding shelter capacity and ensuring that when safe, dignified housing is available, it is utilized. This policy isn't about punishment, it's about partnership. The city is doubling its efforts on interim housing options, including tiny homes and safe sleeping sites, while offering wraparound services to support recovery and stability. But responsibility is a two-way street. When shelter is available and repeatedly declined, we must intervene not to criminalize, but to connect individuals with the help they need. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
I'm speaking in support of not eliminating funding for the Older Adults Health and Wellness Program. My name is Gary Victorine. I've been privileged to be a volunteer high-cap counselor for 8 years. I do counseling at the Southside Community Center. I help seniors understand their Medicare and Medi-Cal options, do problem solving, screen for eligibility and assistance programs, and try to help the clients save money. One challenge is reaching even more people. We need additional Spanish-speaking counselors and need to expand outreach to these communities to improve equity. Again, I'm in support of continued funding for the Older Adults Health and Wellness Program. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hello. My name is Consuelo Collard, and I'm speaking in favor of continuing the grant funds for the Health Insurance Counseling and Advocacy Program, which serves elders 65 and older and those with disabilities who rely on Medicare and Medi-Cal for their doctor visits. Medicare and Medi-Cal are very complicated and confusing programs, especially for those who struggle to communicate in English. There are age, income, and eligibility requirements in both Medicare and Medi-Cal, various supplemental programs, enrollment periods, and potential financial penalties for not enrolling at the right time. Thus, the need for assistance from knowledgeable and bilingual counselors in the health insurance program. A recent example, a monolingual Spanish-speaking client in her 70s was enrolled in both Medicare and Medi-Cal. Her Medi-Cal benefit changed to a very high monthly share of cost.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hello, Council. I'm here today to raise concern about the proposed cut of the older adult wellness and health program. Our city has a growing senior population, and pair that with the fact that most of them, almost half of them, are first-generation immigrant. We see that programs such as the older adult wellness and health program is very crucial. So even though we're in a deficit and difficult decisions need to be made, I hope that that can be your priority. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker. I also received a card from James Campbell, but I will accept no more cards after that. We are already beyond time.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. I'll be short. My name is Eugene Torres, and I'm Director of Programs at Family Supportive Housing, as well as a member of the Racial Equity Action Leadership Coalition, REAL. And today, there's a mixture of feelings, but we all want the same thing. For those that were blessed to be born inside a family that helping others is second nature and isn't even a job or isn't even something you get paid for or you get stipend on how well you do. It's something that you're called to. It's something that you're taught by your elders and shown by giving and showing up and by doing what's hard, not making the easy decisions. And we oppose at Family Supportive Housing and Real the criminalization and the continuance of adding more pressures, adding more barriers to those already struggled and neglected by the system enough, and to give them a leg up. You are all here to be our leaders, and you all should come together to develop one big plan that doesn't hurt or criminalize, but provides funding where it should have been all along, and to provide help.
Thank you. Next speaker.
So I told myself that I was not going to speak today and only listen, but I just want everyone to know I've heard everything that was said today, yesterday, the last week. I am listening, even though I may not be here, and my eyes have been opened on a whole new perspective, and I appreciate every conversation that has taken place today, because it's helped me realize a few things. Being homeless myself, dealing with homelessness, dealing with a bunch of issues that have been going on in my personal life and just in general. I just want to really, let you guys know that there's a lot more issues that are coming, like, you know, as a result of this homelessness problem, and we really need to work together and collaborate and really make a difference in all.
That's your time. Next speaker.
Gail was right. There was nothing offered to the 237 people. And in fact, housing and SJPD actually managed to run my plates while I was helping everybody. So the harassment is awesome. I really wanted to thank you because you have been kick-ass today and standing up for the people, and that is awesome. We need more people like you. Maybe less people like you. I enjoyed talking to your back while you ran away from me. That was awesome, Mulcahy. We really need to not do this. You are going to put your staff at risk because people are either going to ignore housing staff or they're going to consider them snitches, and nothing good happens to snitches. So you should really think about the position that you're putting housing staff in, because they're either going to be ignored or people are going to say, those are the people who told on me. That's why I got arrested. That's why this happened. And that is what you are putting your housing staff in. You should protect your staff.
Back to council.
All right. Thank you all. We will pick up on Wednesday, and I'll see everybody for council tomorrow. We're adjourned.